I'd like to call everyone present today and those watching the broadcast and call the May 29th, 2018 regular meeting to order with all board members present, with the exception of Trustee McQuarrie. The Army JROTC Color Guard from Hoover High School will now present the colors. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Goes forward, march. Good guard, hold, center, face, please and goes.
Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Carefully, goes. Right face, forward, march.
Thank you very much, Hoover High School JROTC Color Guard. If you wish to address the board on any of the agenda items before the board today or on a subject that is not on today's agenda and your name's not on the speaker list printed on blue paper located at both entrances to the auditorium, and you have not already submitted a request for public testimony form, please complete the form and submit it to Cheryl Ward, the board action officer on your left. Speaker forms are located at both entrances to the auditorium. I'd like a motion to adopt today's agenda with Section J, Superintendent's Consent Agenda, to be considered out of order following the adoption of the agenda and acted upon next. Second. We have a motion and a second. Does any board member wish to remove any items from the consent agenda? Okay. We have speakers on consent agenda items. I don't see any here on the blue page.
On the superintendent's consent agenda, items J8, 10, and 30.
Okay. And what about, and then 7 and 23, which were previously removed by staff?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a motion? Oh, we have to, let's vote on the adoption of the agenda first. Sorry. That passes unanimously. Does any board member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Okay. We have speakers on the aforementioned items. Is there a motion to move the consent calendar except for those items? So moved. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Okay, that passes unanimously. Next, we go to our student presentation, recognition, and resolutions. Trustee Barrera, would you please introduce the Area 4 Superintendent, Sophia Ferrer, who will introduce the student presentation for today, Hoover High School.
I'm excited to do this and to hear the presentation tonight. We've got so much really groundbreaking work going on in the Hoover cluster, and so we're gonna hear about that tonight. And it's just something I think this whole district can be proud of. So, Sophia.
Thank you. Board President Beiser and Board Trustees, it is with great enthusiasm and excitement that I'm here to present the Hoover team. There's so many exciting things happening at Hoover. You actually feel great energy and passion when you walk onto the campus, especially when you see the interaction among adults and kids. I promised the principal that I wasn't going to take any of his talking points, so I'm going to keep my little speech very brief. We know that it all starts with leadership, and at the helm of Hoover High School is an amazing leader. And without further ado, I'd like to present the new proud principal of Hoover High School, Jason Babineau.
Good evening. My name is Jason Babineau, and I am the proud principal of Hoover High School.
All right.
It has been an honor to serve the Hoover community and to work with exceptional young men and women like the ones you are about to meet tonight. This year, we became a wall-to-wall school, meaning every student is connected to a small learning community tied to an industry sector. With 4 previously established academies, a group of hardworking teachers have developed our 5th academy, the Social Justice Academy. These Cardinals Academy ambassadors are going to share their unique academy experiences with you. In addition, each individual here was a member of the College Avenue Compact, which guarantees admission to San Diego State University with the completion of specified academic requirements. This is an incredible opportunity for all Hoover Cluster students, and these 5 outstanding senior Cardinals stand as role models for every child who has a dream to go to college. It is an honor to introduce Evelyn Aguilar to begin our story.
My name is Evelyn Aguilar. I am part of AYT, short for Academy of Information Technology. AYT prepares students by giving them the opportunity to take courses such as computer science, game design, GIS, and IT essentials. AYT revolves around technology, which is crucial in our current world because you need to have some technology background in all job requirements. Every year, freshmen participate in a one-day event in the beginning of the year called the Hour of Code, where a company called the Control Group comes to Hoover and informs students about computer science and teaches basic coding. I remember how fascinating this event was when I participated in it. It made me become more curious about this academy, and it encouraged me to stay in it. Although I will not be pursuing a career in the technology field, it has been a wonderful experience. As for my future plans, I will be majoring in kinesiology at San Diego State University in hopes to become a physical therapist one day. Not only did the courses and the support that AYT offered me prepare me for college, but I also owe a lot of it to College Avenue Compact for my guaranteed admission to SDSU. CAC assigns an advisor to every student in the program and offers one-to-one mentoring. In these one-to-ones, they made sure that I was on track with my schoolwork and they answered any questions I had regarding college. My CAC advisor encouraged me to take honors in AP classes that Hoover offered. I was hesitant at first, but I trusted them due to the fact that they knew my potential before I ever did. And I'm glad I did because it benefited my overall GPA of a 4.1. As I leave Hoover, my goal as president of AYT is to have set an example that will allow Hoover to continue forward at having college-ready, career-searching students. It is my pleasure to introduce Luis Dorame.
Good evening. My name is Luis Dorame, and I'm a proud senior representing ALMA, the Academy of Literature, Media, and Arts. ALMA has given the students the opportunity to express themselves in a wide variety of different classes, from theater to visual art courses to an uprising music department, which I am also proud to represent. With the proud diversity that this academy holds, there are also culminating projects through different organizations that help students tell their story through photography, as well as spoken word, and a full-on opera production that was held in our auditorium 2 years ago. The Alma Academy has given students the opportunity to go out into the community and demonstrate their artistry and individuality, as well as give students the tools to succeed with real-world skills. My ultimate experience in the Academy has proved that a hardworking and determined student can achieve some truly amazing milestones. The music department has granted me the leadership position as president for the orchestra program. Under the mentorship of the music director, I have been able to transform the orchestra department by taking our most advanced group to compete against other schools in competitions, as well as perform in different events throughout San Diego. Through this experience, I've learned how difficult, exciting, and interesting leading an ensemble can be. As my fellow colleague had discussed the College Avenue Compact, CAC has given me the motivation to stay on track in my academics. My mentors have been able to do this by advising and pushing me to achieve even higher goals than what I would typically shoot for. And I greatly appreciate everything this program has done for me and my fellow Cardinals. I plan to attend San Diego State in the fall to study music education with the goal of becoming a music teacher so that I can give back to my community and teach younger generations music. Through ALMA and its tremendous support, the Hoover community has definitely shaped me to become the great leader I am today. It is with great pleasure I introduce Luani Osorio.
Hi, my name is Wani Osorio. I plan on going to SDSU and major in psychology, hoping to be a future pediatric psychologist. I am here to represent the Health Academy from Hoover High School. The Health Academy partners with Rady Children's Hospital to form a program called Faces for the Future. Both the program and the academy work together to provide hands-on and professional healthcare experience to their students. They also offer support from academic to personal problems students are facing. One experience that not many high school students get is interning in the hospital. Having this opportunity, I was able to complete an internship with the Neuroscience, Integrative, and Audiology department. This experience was not only fulfilling, but it also made me realize that I want to continue on the career path to medicine. Thanks to the partnership the Health Academy has with Rady's, students are provided with mentors that guide and prepare them throughout their high school experience. If it wasn't for my mentor, applying for college would have been much more difficult. She offered me the support I needed when it came to college apps and financial aid. Another great program that Hoover provides is College Avenue Compact, also known as CAC. CAC offers workshops for parents so they can have a better understanding of how college works. They also have translators available most of the time, and they tend to keep in contact with parents to keep them updated on students' grades in order to help them succeed. CAC also helps the whole Hoover community, not just the CAC scholars. And sexually, CAC is a great tool that benefits the entire Hoover population. It's a pleasure to introduce Alexander Sanchez Reyes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alexander Sanchez Reyes, and it is an honor to be here representing the Social Justice Academy. I am here tonight to speak on behalf of my academy and the College Avenue Compact program. The Social Justice Academy is a brand new academy with a mission to educate, organize, and advocate positive social action for self, family, community, and the environment. Since our academy is the largest, the student cabinet and myself as a vice president found ways to bring collaboration opportunities for every student to participate and build a community around in our campus. We learn to work with one another because that is how the real world works, with different languages, cultures, ideas, and stories. This academy has helped me prepare for college in the way to see everyone's perspective. One major experience this year was in my English class, when we got invited to the Museum of Photographic Arts to watch a documentary called Joshua versus Superpower. Some may know what this subject is about and others may not. To summarize, it is about a young advocate named Joshua who at the age of 14 fought for education in China, to have liberty to choose what they want to learn at school rather than have the government implement a one-centered curriculum. This film goes in depth with the young advocate's actions step by step and witness what a great impact he had on his family, community, and country by having a passion and willing to fight for what he believed in. Furthermore, with the support of College Avenue Compact, I was able to complete all of my college applications and financial aid that brings stress upon us seniors during the start of our senior year. With the extra hand that they provided, it is easier to understand and get it revised as well as edited before submitting. I will be attending San Diego State University to pursue a major in civil engineering. Attending Hoover these past 4 years have taught me not to be afraid of who I am and where I come from. Hoover has their arms open to anyone despite their background and the challenges they are living with, because we are a family and Hoover wants us to strive for greatness. It is an honor to introduce my classmate, Karime Narciso, to the lectern.
Good evening. My name is Karime Narciso. I am 17 years old and a senior at Hoover High School. I am in the Sustainable Academy of Building and Engineering, also known as SABE. As stated in the acronym, my academy finds ways to be sustainable in a creative way to help our school and our community by building projects in our woodshop. One major project I took part in was during my sophomore year, where we built sheds and donated a couple to the City Heights Fair at 44, which they used as an office and storage. Through field trips hosted by SABE, I have been exposed to many potential careers and even learned skills to be college ready, such as flexibility, adaptability, collaboration, and communication, both with classmates and adults. Additionally, through Hoover's College Avenue Compact program, other students and I had the opportunity to travel exploring different college options. Last summer, we visited 3 different schools, starting with UC Santa Barbara, then Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and lastly, UCLA. This all-expense-paid trip gave me a straight glance at the college experience, especially by staying in the dorms for one night. Through the CAC program, I also exceeded the requirements to receive guaranteed admission to SDSU, where I plan on attending in the fall, majoring in communication with a minor in television, film, and new media, in order to have a career as an executive producer. It is because of the exceptional programs offered at Hoover, as well as the guidance of the wonderful teachers and staff, that I am the person I am today. They have taught me how to be a leader, step out of my comfort zone, and take advantage of every opportunity that comes my way. Thank you for allowing us to share our incredible Hoover experience. Have a great night.
Thank you very much. Hoover High School is definitely in the house tonight. Thank you. We go on to the next agenda item, which is item C2. This is an action item on a resolution to support the Climate Science Literacy Program. Do I have a motion? We have a motion. Is there a second? We have multiple seconds. We do have speakers on the item. We have a few speakers, so we'll have 2 minutes each, please. Blair Lee, Michael Smith,
I'm Blair Lee. Should I just start?
Yep. You have 2 minutes.
I am in favor of the climate literacy program. My name is Blair Lee. I've been involved in science education for 30 years as a science author, college professor, and public speaker. We're in the middle of an environmental crisis. If you think I'm incorrect, it only emphasizes the point I'm trying to make, and it is that we are doing an inadequate job of educating people about the science that explains human-caused global warming and how that is causing substantial climate change. Climate change denial is at its very center an education issue. Climate change denial could not even be an issue if people had ownership over the science explaining it. The word ownership used in this context refers to the information you just know. If I were to tell you that 2 + 3 = 4, you would think I was not a very well-educated person, and most people would agree with you. It's because you have ownership over that issue. The problem is, we do not hold people to the same basic standard when it comes to understanding science that explains climate change. We are in the middle of an environmental crisis. It is a critical area to educate children about because we cannot solve the problem without a solid understanding of the science explaining it. The science explaining climate change is actually quite straightforward and not particularly complicated, which is good. It means that creating ownership for this is obtainable. We just need to teach it. Thank you, and I hope that you agree with me and adopt the climate literacy program.
Evening, President Beiser and members of the board. I'm Michael Smith. I'll be brief. First, I agree with everything the previous speaker just said. Second, I'm the parent of a 10-year-old in the district, a 5th grader who already at that young age is seriously concerned about the ongoing degradation of the biosphere and really worried about the world that he can expect to grow up in. I think we owe it to his cohort, his generation, as well as those who will come later, to provide them with a firm, science-based understanding of climate literacy and the actions they can take both in the near term and in the longer term to mitigate the impacts of climate change and to adapt their behavior to the changes that are coming. I strongly support adoption of this resolution. I think it's critical both for students in our district and across the country, and I urge you to adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you. James Ferguson, Jim Miller, Kelly Mayhew, come forward in any order.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm co-chair of San Diego 350's public policy team, and I think I have other colleagues here. But I came to speak in support of this common sense, I'm sure it cannot fail proposal. I really hope that that's the case. Hello, Superintendent Martin. We meet again. Hello. first time that I heard about climate change was when I attended my very first college course in 1975. We studied greenhouse gases, we studied climate change, we studied what would happen, we studied timelines that those would happen in, we studied the reasons for them. They had already been known for at least 20 years before that. And so I thought, you know, good, we got this. We know about it, we can fix it. In the meantime, there's been a decades-long program of disinformation to make sure that certain economic forces have not been impacted. And the problem that we now have is that we've transformed it from an issue of science, an issue of what's actually happening, into a political issue. And it's really essential. These kids and young people are going to live in this world that we are creating. And it's no longer in the distant future. It's no longer far away. It is the increasing pace and intensity of climate disasters that we have, as fires and prolonged droughts and famines and displacement of people and resource warfare. Those things are going to happen increasingly in their lifetimes. We'll be dead. But we have to teach them how to do life in those conditions unless we can change it, and we can. We have many, many things that we do all the time in our team and in the legislature and around the country, which are making a huge difference.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you very much for your support.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I'll try not to get the red light. My name is Jim Miller. I teach at San Diego City College. I'm with the American Federation of Teachers, Local 1931. I'm the chair of the San Diego Imperial County's Labor Council Environmental Caucus, as well as the chair of the California Federation of Teachers statewide Climate Justice Task Force. So, and most importantly, I'm the parent of a child at Roosevelt Middle School here in San Diego. And I'm standing here to thank you for this resolution in support of climate literacy. You know, given the crisis that the previous speakers have mentioned, there's so many things on your plate every single meeting, but really, in the times we're living in, nothing could be more important than preparing the next generation to deal with what is the crisis of our time. And I think given the fact that this has become a political issue, it sometimes takes some courage to step up and put something like this forward, but really nothing could be more important. Thank you for taking this action.
Thank you.
And I'm not going to add much new, but I'm Kelly Mayhew. I am the other parent of the soon-to-be 9th grader at San Diego High. I'm also the co-chair of the now Labor and Climate Justice Education Committee for the California Federation of Teachers. I coordinate the Labor Studies program at San Diego City College, and I teach about climate literacy in my English classes because we need to. What I appreciate about this resolution is how much it offers guidance for teachers, how it's got some good teeth in it. If we don't educate our kids now, they won't have a future that we would be depriving them of. In my classes, I teach them how to analyze the discourse surrounding climate change. I would love to have there be fewer cases of negative discourse surrounding it and to be able to just look at the facts. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I know you guys don't get to hear that very often, but thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Derek Cassidy, an organizer with the Climate Mobilization Coalition, the San Diego Climate Mobilization Coalition. I believe that if the students knew what was happening with the climate today, they would be in the streets like the young people are in Florida regarding the gun reform, the need for gun reform. Our television, our media, our churches, and our major educational institutions are not telling the people what is happening. Every night, if we were really telling people what's happening, our television would be our television stations would be warning people that we're on a path to the end of civilization, truly. And the Scripps Institution of Oceanography has recently issued a report that there's a 5% chance of human extinction by 2050. Now, that's not a very big percentage, 5%, but they said if you were going on an airplane and they told you it had a 5% chance of crashing, you wouldn't go. So it really is serious, and we've not been told the truth, and the fossil fuel industry has been spending millions of dollars to confuse people all over this country and in the media. Interestingly, our school district today has in the Advanced Placement Environmental Studies textbook a wonderful section about the need to take strong action and talking about the work of Mark Jacobson at Stanford University, who has computer modeled the complete changeover of this country to renewable wind, water, and solar energy. Thank you for taking this seriously and for having this hearing tonight.
Nancy, did you want to speak as well? Nancy Cassidy.
Thank you. Thank you for the privilege of not exactly adhering to the proper procedure. Just to reiterate, it is an extremely dire situation, and there is still much that can be done. I recommend to you a book called Drawdown. If you've not seen it, it lists the studies for the 100 most effective things to do in order to address the climate emergency. You've taken the steps that have been very inspiring, including Meatless Monday, because having a more plant-based diet is the second part of what we must do if civilization is going to be able to survive. We have to get off fossil fuels. In order to do that, we have to have the new energy system built. And that should be the priority for every opportunity to spend any government money. It should be directed to this transition to the new infrastructure. This is a jobs program we're talking about. The new infrastructure of wind, water, and solar so we can get off fossil fuels, and then addressing the culture of a plant-based diet. Those are the two parts. Got to do them both. Commend you so much for your attention on food waste and your alternatives to packaging. You guys are really inspiring. I only wish that more people knew of your good work. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public testimony. Board member comments or questions? All right, seeing none, please vote. That motion passes unanimously. Next, I'd like to consider item G8, which is recognition of Dwayne Crenshaw. If you look in your agenda under item G8, it's a proclamation on behalf of the board recognizing Dwayne Crenshaw, who's the CEO of Rise San Diego, for his work facilitating the district committee on the elections. Is Dwayne Crenshaw here at this time? Can I get a motion on the proclamation? We have a motion and a second. Okay, trustees, comments or remarks? Dr. Whitehurst-Payne.
I want to say that he was on my choice list to serve on the committee for the elections, and then he wound up chairing the group that facilitated the whole process. And I was very proud of him. I'm very proud of him and the group and the work that they did. And I want to say thank you for serving in that capacity, and we thought you did an outstanding job of facilitating that given the time constraints and so forth. So just want to publicly say thank you for taking on that civic duty and shepherding that activity. Thank you.
Any other board member comments? I would like to, say thank you very much, Mr. Crenshaw. You took on a very challenging task that we had asked of you, and you stepped forward, and I really appreciate all the time and the hours, the weeks, meeting with different members of the community and facilitating the whole process. So thank you very much. I really, really appreciate your commitment to the school district and our kids. Thank you. Seeing no other comments, please vote. Okay, that passes unanimously. Dwayne, would you like to say a word or two?
Good evening. Thank you so much for that recognition. I want to acknowledge, first and foremost, this board for calling a community process together. Far too often we don't do civil dialogue, we don't truly engage citizens, and you all did that. The time was tight, but the issue was important, and I think the feedback from many folks in this room was important and critical to receive. So I just want to say thank you for the opportunity and hope that we can continue to partner together on bringing citizens and parents and teachers and community together on behalf of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have this proclamation right here. Could I ask the board to take a picture with Mr. Crenshaw, please? Smile. Thank you. Good job, man. There you go. Hard time. Okay, that takes us to Section D on the agenda, which is public participation and non-agenda public testimony. We set aside 30 minutes of our board meeting at this point in time, and then we have additional minutes that we can use to hear a non-agenda public testimony at the end of the meeting. We've received over 21 requests, looks like even more than that. So in order to hear from everybody in the 30 minutes that we have, what we do is we adjust the time. If we only had 10 people, everybody would get 30 minutes. 3 minutes, sorry, 30 minutes total, sorry. That'd be a great board meeting, huh? But yeah, and so because we have well over 23, 24 people, then in order to hear what everybody has to say, unfortunately we're going to limit the testimony to 1 minute so that we could hear from everybody all the different concerns they have. So let's go ahead and please come on forward in any order and please begin speaking. Citizen Francisca Salcedo, Francine Maxwell, Luis Lucas.
So please respond to my complaint that I sent to you in email by June 30. The district website fails to inform citizens that it is optional to give your name and your address to a government entity. So please correct that. Also, please remove the statement on your website that states the board requests that speakers for comment only on issues and not on individuals. It is an illegal action to control public speeches. So please correct that. And one of them is as easy as just placing the word optional on these sign-in sheets. Thank you.
Francine Maxwell, our prime purpose in this life is to help others, and if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. Board trustees, your one employee has hurt thousands of students and thousands of parents since her tenure here with that secret appointment as our superintendent. No community input, no community vetting or anything. Recently, her visit to Lincoln traumatized parents who were coming to school to observe their children. They had security called on them. She was sitting there in the conference room, her and her leadership team. So how disgraceful do you say when you want parent involvement? And I have a teacher that she knows about, that the General Counsel has made Lincoln keep, who had parents escorted off the campus. And I want to thank the security for the professionalism that they've shown the parents, that they had to come and eject from a class when they were trying to watch that teaching and learning was not occurring with their student there on campus. I think it's time for you to wake up and just stop it and buy her out of her contract.
Louise Lucas, classified employee. This is just to say that the abyss is growing between the staffing recommendations your Human Resources Department makes to you, that you approve without apparent question or discussion, and the work your classified employees are expected to get done. The left hand truly does not know, as in comprehend, what the right hand is doing. As a group, we classified folks like working in supporting positions, we like the jobs we applied for, and we agree with the expectations in our position descriptions. As a group, we classified folks who are pretty freaked out by all the related duties as assigned we are now expected to add on. Duties that were originally covered by, say, registered nurses, actual librarians, or designated computer technicians. And not only are we expected to do these so-called related duties, we're expected to be cheerful while being told our salaries, benefits, and pensions are a burden. It feels like the words structural deficit are your secret code for classified employees. Forgive us. We're here to remind you we are priceless. Thank you.
Celeste Bobrick Ozaki, David Hartman, Jesus Ingunzes, Marcela Iniguez. Iniguez? Is that? Yes. Okay. Please come forward if your name's been called and speak in any order. You have 1 minute.
Good evening. My name is Celeste Papakozaki. I currently have 3 children enrolled in the San Diego Unified School District. I'm here to speak on behalf of the auditory oral DHH family at Whitman Elementary. An updated letter was sent home to the families regarding this relocation of the only auditory oral DHH program to Lafayette Elementary. In this letter, Kristen McKenna referred to that this decision was backed up by data from a legislative analyst report, which, if you actually read it, comes down to that school districts are not capable of educating DHH students. They're better off being shipped off to regional programs. It is apparent that Kristen McKenna's letter really questions her own credibility, the credibility of the special education department, and that of the San Diego Unified School District. I will be giving you a copy of my formal statement because I only have less than a minute. However, I want to reaffirm our assertion that we are requesting that the San Diego Board of Education direct the San Diego Unified School District to rescind the decision to relocate this program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jesus Iniguez. I am the father of Samuel Iniguez. I want to first apologize. I didn't let my son speak the last time he was here. There's something I want to try since we only have a minute. I'm just going to make it quick. When he first got his hearing aids, the first thing he kept repeating that he heard us say a lot was no hay nada, meaning there's nothing. I'm not sure what we try to keep him away from, but he got that pretty quick and he kept repeating it over and over. So this is a lot longer than just no hay nada. So I'm going to see if he'll do it. Ready, Papa? See. Happy birthday to you. Louder, louder. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Daddy. Happy birthday to you. Louder, to you. Thank you.
I am the proud mother of Sammy. My name is Marcela. And the reason why we're here is because we want to tell you guys to think about the relocation of the program, the DHH oral program, and that is the program that my son is and has helped him a lot. When he was born, he was diagnosed with hard of hearing, and we thought we would never hear his voice. We thought we would never hear him say mommy or daddy. So, and as parents of him, we want the best for him, and the best for him is for you guys to think about not sending that program to Lafayette. And that's my request as a parent, for you guys to think, I want the best for my son, and I know you guys want the best for your son, for your children. And the best thing, again, is for him to have that program stay at Whitman. And thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
David Hartman. I'm an OTABS employee. I want to echo what Ms. Lucas was saying, that we are getting smaller and smaller in our offices at our schools. A lot of positions are vacant and aren't being filled. They're not being posted on the website. There's difficulties on the website. I requested a password change. Never got any response. It's been a week. So you might want to communicate with HR. There's not a lot of recruitment on new employees within the classified spectrum. And we are also being given these furlough days, and in good faith, we hope that you're able to give those back to us for the 1920 school year, because our workload did not change when we were given those furlough days. We're still expected to do the same amount of work. And if the Me Too clause is in fact true, then we should be given those days back so we can actually get back to the levels we were at prior to the furlough days. I really hope that this district can get their act together.
Jennifer Nunez, Debbie Glanz.
Our group is going to go now.
I've called Jennifer Nunez and Debbie Glanz.
But you didn't call 5 through...
Yeah, we're grouping them by subject matter content.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Nunez, and I'm here with Daniel Encinas. We're both parents to Santiago Encinas. He attends Whitman at the oral program. We're here to support the previous parents, just to let you guys know a little bit. They're trying to move the oral program to Lafayette from Whitman. At Whitman, our son and like Sammy and other kids have a classroom that is adapted to them. Not only is the AC adapted to them, where they get their speech therapy is within that same classroom, so they don't have to be pulled from the classroom, taken to another classroom, taken away from classroom time, taken away from activities and things like that. Everything is there for them. Everything is there accommodated for them. That's why the classroom was built for that reason, to accommodate those children. And just like Sammy, my son has benefited from that program. He's been there 1 year, and he has come up home with words that I've never even thought he would say. So this is me, a mother who worries about her son. He already has challenges with the hearing loss, and it just seems like you guys just didn't even consult us. You guys sent somebody to have a parent meeting, and right then and there at the beginning of the meeting, she clearly set the tone saying, this is a decision that's been made and this is what we're moving forward with. What was she there for then, if she wasn't there to listen to the parents, if she wasn't there to have our input, if she didn't have any medical background? I was speaking to a lot of speech therapists who do not agree with this, and they look down upon this. There's no research on this. There's nothing. You guys are just doing it to save money.
Debbie Glantz. All right, Debbie, last call. Francisca Salcedo.
President Beiser,
okay.
At the last meeting, we requested that the staff review the situation with the DHH program, and my understanding that they're still researching that and taking into consideration.
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay.
Yeah. Billy Stewart, Ashley Beaver, Leslie Faulkner, and Judy Neufeld Fernandez. Please come forward and speak, please. You have 1 minute.
Karen DiGioregi. We're all in the group together.
I'm sorry.
I am on the list. We're just.
Oh, okay.
I was just standing there.
Thank you. Just
All right.
if you state your name, then I can make sure that you submitted the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's sad to watch speakers like that, and with our group, watching this district ignoring the voice of the majority of its stakeholders, removing parent involvement, making decisions without the parents involved, like the sexual health. I've seen and done your surveys, your town hall meetings, cluster congress, and petitions, yet when this board sees the clear positions and opinions, it completely disregards them. Still, to this day, last year and this, the vast majority of parents I've spoken to at the middle schools are still shocked at this aggressive sex ed feeding the full range of sexual experience to 11-year-olds, our 11-year-olds. You're ignoring us, you're ignoring the parents, and you're just doing what organizations like Advocates for Youth, Planned Parenthood, and the ACLU are wanting you to do. Why are you allowing them to make decisions for our children? They don't represent the values of our stakeholders. Engage parents like the LCAP requires. All we're asking is that you suspend this curriculum and listen to us and help us come up with a well-vetted, parent involvement, age-appropriate, representing our shared community values. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Don Carson. I am the father of 3 adult children and 4 amazing granddaughters. And it is hard for me to imagine them growing up and entering into the school curriculum that would ultimately teach them a very wrong way to go. As it's been said here already, we want the best for our children. The SHEP program is not the best for our children. What we need to do is get the community involved, the values that are broadly represented, do some more research on what would be really good and helpful and beneficial for our kids so that they can grow up and be part of the solution in our world and not be, in my opinion, corrupted with a curriculum that would send them in a bad direction. I think that the curriculum that offers pornographic websites and will be a gateway drug into bad things. Thank you.
From the Office of Public Affairs.
Could you please state your name so I can keep track of the meeting?
Judy Neufeld Fernandez.
Thank you.
From the Office of Public Affairs, sexually transmitted diseases reach a new high in California with a 45% increase in the past 5 years, with youth being hit the hardest. Yet, our district Sex Myths 8th grade video spends more time reinforcing sex myths than it does clarifying pregnancy prevention. Teens hear all about pulling out, not coming, soda as a douche, girl on top, standing up, doing it in a pool. Teen sex scenarios culminate with the boyfriend doing the wrong thing, talking his girlfriend into sex without a condom. Afterwards, she's worried about pregnancy while he lolls about in a hammock, clearly uninterested. She opts for the post-coital technique of jumping jacks. Her boyfriend does muster the energy to advise her to jump higher. This is the only contribution to pregnancy prevention in this scenario played out. The weight of the pregnancy scare rests solely on the female. This message is not a message we want to affirm in our teen boys.
Thank you.
The San Diego Unified Parents, this district has done a bait and switch with this curriculum. It's not medically accurate. It is not scientifically based, and it is not healthy.
And it is mandated by the state.
You're falsely presenting the California Healthy Youth Act. This curriculum is not mandated by the state.
We're going to take a 5-minute recess. Okay, let's have order in the board. Ma'am, you're out of order. Let's have order in the board meeting, please. Okay. Billy Stewart, please.
Thank you very much. Do I get that 5-minute recess period to speak? Good recess. My name is Billy Stewart. I'm a father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, and I consider it a privilege to stand here before you and to share with you the burden that's on my heart, not only about our children, but about your children and the children in the public school system. I know there's other alternatives that are available other than public schools today, but it's difficult for a lot of people to be able to be in a position to afford that. So I believe that every person in attendance here tonight can say one thing. The area that I'm talking on is the teaching about abortion. Abortion is a very tender subject to me because I have children, and I know the joy of having a child that is my own flesh, blood, and to see the child grow and develop. But a lot of this education that's being brought about today is because my parents made a decision to have me and not to abort me. And I would love to see the children today being taught the same way of living. Protect life. Life is special. Life is precious. And just one, medical science says a new human being is created at the time of conception. You're not killing a fetus. You're not killing an embryo. You're killing a human being when an abortion takes place. And think about it, how grateful you should be that you're here tonight to hear this man stand here and say it's nice to be alive, that we are not a statistic of abortion.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Next
much.
speaker.
Thank you.
We're gonna go back to the list and follow the list in order so that we can make sure that everybody has the opportunity to speak. Ashley Beaver.
I have samples of the curriculum.
Thank you. Did you want to pass down samples of the
Would you pass them down,
state
please?
curriculum? Thank you, Ms. Ward.
Okay, hi. Last year when my older daughter was in the 6th grade, I gave her parts of the curriculum to read, and she said something really poignant. She said, "Mom, I'm going to have to put a condom on my head in order to protect my mind." Okay, exposing children to adult sexual behavior before they're ready is a form of abuse. It is not a restorative practice to embarrass children. To have adults talk to 6th graders about sexual pleasure, too much. To send them to websites where they can learn to ask for consent in a sexy way, not appropriate. Sex with objects in high school, too much. These are not consenting adults. Please partner with parents and put this on the agenda as an actionable item. Or suspend it and let's engage and find something more appropriate and represents our shared community values. We don't want this now, and we do not want this coming to elementary school as the National Sexuality Education Standards is designed to do.
So
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beaver, and thank you for bringing copies of the state-mandated curriculum booklets. Leslie Faulkner.
Good evening. I'm a retired kindergarten teacher at Erickson Elementary for 20 years in the district. I loved my students. I cared about my students, and I still do. It breaks my heart to see my little children being exposed to this horrific curriculum. It is shocking. It is sickening. It is corrupt. It is graphic and moral offenses. It needs to be suspended. It needs to be suspended now. And if suspension is delayed further without written permission by informed parents. Parents are not being informed, should be mandatory. SHEP is 180 degrees opposed to community values. It undermines faith and families who adhere to abstinence, virtue, and purity. SHEP is not going to solve bullying in community and in our schools or keep our schools safe. It's going to cause embarrassment, stress, confusion, dissonance, anxiety, guilt, and shame. It is opening Pandora's box. God is not going to be mocked. If you sow to the wind, you are going to reap the whirlwind. Let's stick to academics, the golden rule, and character development. Lay aside your politics and do what is best, right, and just for the students created in God's image. Seek God's wisdom. You need it. Search your hearts. Follow God's laws. God will bless our schools. He will protect our schools. Just do what is right. Thank you.
Gail Levin. Gail Levin.
Gail Levin, Affiliate Relations Director of the Salt Lake Council. CSE does not work. Key findings of an in-depth review of 60 of the best peer-reviewed studies of 40 CSE programs used in U.S. schoolrooms include the following. Teen pregnancy, only one program, reported a short-term reduction in teen pregnancy. A subsequent study in another location found increased pregnancy rates. STD prevention, none of the school-based CSE studies demonstrated a reduction in teen STDs. In fact, only 2 measured it. Teen abstinence, although 4 studies reported 12-month increases in abstinence, 12 other studies found no such positive effects and 1 negative effect. Consistent condom use, none of the CSE program showed effectiveness at increasing consistent condoms used by teens. Benefit of teen abstinence and condom use, none. Produced sustained effects on both outcomes negatively. 5 of the 40 produced significant increases in sexual initiation, recent sex, oral sex, or pregnancy.
Sherry Walker.
Good evening, Board. This wraps for you. This nation is rattled by shootings galore, yet headlines are waiting to report even more of gunfires blaze with bullets that kill students and teachers at somebody's will. Too many too soon in classrooms and halls have had their blood splattered on school desks and walls. Blame it on guns! Call for new laws that seek to control, yet denying the cause. Children kill children with crazed intent. We question just where our sanity went. But tragic is this, yet still other wars are aiming their weapons through our school doors. Not just here at home, but in districts throughout. Most parents are clueless of what it's about. In small font or large, its target is set upon innocent youth to be caught in a net of sexual pleasures where anything goes. Adult entertainment with ribbons and bows. It's theirs for the asking to try with a friend. It's to be expected. That's how the story ends. Shep like a gun is purposefully aimed without rhyme or reason to morally maim purity's chance for each girl and boy. Instead, it will make them each other's toy. Too much, too soon. With fist in the air, the parents cry out, does the board even care? Parents know best, grandparents too. Shep must be repealed. It's what you must do. Think of your own offspring. Replace it with pages with content that matches kids of all ages. Yet this can be done. Just start once again. Come up with a program that we can opt in.
John Moore. Dwayne Lindstrom.
Thank you. My name is John Moore. I'm a retired businessman and San Diego City resident. In April of this year, a Horace Mann middle school teacher is reported to have shown a 6th grade class a graphic sexual video during a physical education class. SDUSD is investigating the incident, and an unnamed employee has been placed on leave. In another incident in April of this year, a 5th grade teacher at Rosa Parks Elementary in City Heights was charged with distributing child pornography of young girls, including a toddler. 59-year-old David Weeks was arrested. A search of Weeks' residence and his computer revealed numerous files featuring child pornography. He's being held on bond on grounds that he's a danger to the community. How did such teachers pass approval by school administrators? How long did they engage in illicit behavior with students prior to being caught? How can parents be confident that such teachers aren't placed in sexual education classes? Parents have a right to know that their children are unquestionably protected from predators.
Dwayne Lindstrom.
Good evening. I understand this school district has one of the highest suicide rates in the state. Is that true? Top 5, top 3? I understand that the rates are at a 40-year high right now. Is that true? That's true, isn't it? You know, I'm going to tell you that if you go forward with this sex education program, it is only going to get worse, because what is going on here is a cultural war. The first thing on the curriculum for 6th graders, we're talking 11-year-old kids, is gender identity. Why is that the first thing on the curriculum? It's not about sex education. It's not about biological science. It's about promulgating and pushing a worldview upon them. It's about sowing the seed of idea of gender confusion. Gender dysphoria is what you're trying to promote with the children. Now, the statistics show that 80% of teenagers and youth that identify as transsexual during their youth, 80% of them walk away from it. But the ones that don't have a suicide rate that's 20 times higher than the general population. So it's a worldview of despair that is being pushed upon the children to replace a worldview of hope that the rest of us get from God and from the Bible.
Archie Robinson. Dean Broyles. Archie Robinson.
I just want to address two things. First of all,
can you please state your name for the record?
I'm Dean Broyles.
Thank you, sir.
I'm an attorney. I'm with the National Center for Law and Policy. I've delved into the California Healthy Youth Act. President Beiser, you've said 2 or 3 times tonight an absolute lie, legally, factually, morally, that you said that this curriculum, the 3 R's curriculum, SHEP curriculum that's offered here in this district is mandated and required by the state. That is absolutely not true. I've studied all the law, the California Healthy Youth Act, and the requirements of the California Board of Education. There are only recommended curriculum. There are no mandated curriculum under the California Healthy Youth Act because it's too new and a framework has not even been developed yet. So you are wrong. There are no mandated curriculums. As a matter of fact, Capistrano just pulled their curriculum from Sex Etc., which is almost as bad as this one, and they're developing their own, okay? There is no mandated curriculum, and we want you to respond to the parents' requests for public records about how this curriculum was adopted and who was behind it. We submitted a request. You asked for an extension. We gave you an extension, and almost a year later, we still don't have the public records. And now you want to destroy them. Now you want to destroy records after 6 months. Please don't destroy those records. We required them, and we're going to go to court to get them if you don't provide them to us. Thank you very much.
Archie Robinson.
I'm not going to waste much time. I've been here before. And one thing I just want you to know, all of this grief that you hear, and everybody's been passionate, from climate to Hoover, everybody's been passionate about what they're saying. We're passionate about this. Pastors that you see behind me, we're passionate behind this. Families, mothers, fathers, we're passionate behind this. This doesn't have to be. All you have to do is talk to some of us, allow us to come in and work this thing out. It doesn't have to be like this. If you want it like this, you'll get it like this. But it doesn't have to be this way. Parents just want something to be able to allow our children to be what they need to be, not what you're causing them to be. Because what you're causing them to be is getting ready to do some great harm. We're talking about in our city about not having enough fathers. This is going to put things out there. And so we just need your help to just pull it in. Just pull it in. And let's just talk about it. It doesn't have to get here. So always just telling you what you're doing is just too much, too soon.
Hannah DeRegge. Hannah DeRegge.
Someone went in her spot.
Okay. Shamila Harrison. Shamila Harris.
Yeah, it's at the point, man, where having all these meetings every day, we ain't getting nowhere. So who's the overseers? Whitehurst Payne said, my family is making noise. I talked to Beiser. You tell me you're a math teacher. Are you a president or are you a math teacher? All we want is answers. We want things to be done. We have bullying going on from the staff at Lincoln, from the administrators. We're going to keep allowing this? You have an excuse for everything. We can't come here every single time. I'm wasting gas, energy. I work 12 hours a day. We come here for years and years and years. Some people have been here for years. We sit back, come here all the time. Where are we getting at? Where are the answers? All we want is answers. So what are we going to do? You guys have kids? You guys have any of y'all have kids or what? Do you have kids? Am I talking to robots? Am I talking to robots? You speak on trash, you speak on all this, and shout out to the Hoover students who's doing something because they denied my kids' education. My students, I had honor roll students who's not going to college no more. They have 158 absences and straight Fs, and you know the reason why. I'm not gonna keep talking and talking and talking and talking, but anybody else, parents who riding with me, and I run this community, by the way, and you wanna vote? Go ahead, run for what you're running for, because I would definitely shut it down, every last one of you, especially Payne. For you to sit back and say my family's making noise, my son has a brain injury. My child was attacked by a teacher. That's noise? The same teacher who's making racial epithets. We have students being stabbed. We have everything you name. It doesn't even matter. I'm not going to keep talking and talking. You can look at me like you still answer my question. So what are we going to do? Are you there? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Do I got to be a recyclable to get a response or what? I'm nice and calm. What are we going to do? You said Cindy Martin right here. Are you ready for trial? For that ridiculous case you're going through? This is unheard of. How do you look yourself in the mirror? How do you look at yourself in the mirror? I don't care about your 2 minutes. I don't care about 30 minutes. Because I'm paying your salary. So let's go ahead. I'm standing for all of us here. I'm not going to sit back and look at all you guys every day. You know what I'm saying? What are we going to tell my child about going to college? What is he going to do? I'm not raising failures. The mother is highly educated. The whole family's educated. Like I said, I run San Diego. So you want me to start, you think that little media team was out there? I run the whole district you sitting in. Do you even know what Southeast San Diego is like? Whitehurst Payne? Do you even know? It's about respect, love, and everything that Soto is not doing. Soto's not doing anything over there but bullying those employees, hiding reports. You sitting there smirking. Wiggum is the main cause. Soto sits there. There's several reports going unreported. I have a family member. I have a parent out here whose student was stabbed.
Thank you.
In the throat. It's no thank you. What are we going to do? You're not answering my question. What are we going to do?
We have 4 more speakers.
I don't give a damn if we got 100. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Answer my question. All I want is answer. What are we going to do, man? You never called me back today. What are we going to do? I'm here right now. We're going to do something now. We're not going to sit back and talk all day because everybody has issues here. We're all paying tax. We're all doing what we got to do. We want our kids to be successful. What are you going to be here, Mr. Math Teacher? Are you a president, first off, or are you a math teacher? Every time we talk to you, you told me you was a math teacher.
Sir, we have 4 more speakers.
I don't care. Like I said, you're not answering my question. What are we going to do? What are we going to do?
School board meeting.
What are we going to do? I don't care about how many. I don't care if you got 100. They're going to say the same thing, cry on deaf ears. What are we going to do here?
Okay, Jacqueline.
Man, what are we? No. What are we going to do here? We going to run away like you guys did last time?
Jacqueline Elijah.
Okay, sir. The reason why he's
You have
upset,
1 minute. Are you Jacqueline Elijah, ma'am?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. You have 1 minute.
I want to talk to you. I want to talk to the citizens of San Diego, and I want to talk to the citizens of America. Right now, all of our children are going through this traumatic craziness about shootings and killings. And then yet we are allowing abortions and we're killing our children in the womb, that their parents are being the murderers of their own child and most wanted, so to speak. And now we're getting into sexual orientation to young 6th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders, 9th graders, 10th graders. They can't even get married. And it's just the same if someone went into your house, citizens of San Diego and Americans, and they took your child and they took him to a room and started showing him how to masturbate, show him how to have vaginal sex, and show him how to have anal sex as well as all this other disgusting things that is out of the marriage agreement. And earlier, to where they 18 and 21 they can get married, but they're showing them at 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and then they wonder how come we're all out of control. America, you gotta stand up. America, stand up for your children. Nobody else is going to stand up for your children. They're not going to protect your child. They're not going to say, don't hurt them. Don't kill them. Don't hurt them. Don't teach them stuff they
Deborah
shouldn't know.
Beaver.
No one's going to stand up for your children but you. Opt out of this. And number one.
Deborah Beaver. Last call for Deborah Beaver.
Excuse me, number one, I don't know why. Wait, right now, you've said some things that we've allowed you to say and you shouldn't have said.
I'm now informing the board and the audience that this disruptive behavior now occurring is causing serious...
Well, do something about it. We won't make no noise. Do something about it.
If it does not cease immediately, I will instantly adjourn the board meeting and the auditorium hall may be cleared so that order may be restored to this meeting. If any board member objects to the clearing of the auditorium, determine if there is a consensus of the board to support the clearing if such consensus exists, and then repeat the direction to the police officers unless the disorder is of a very sensitive nature that to delay a vote or taking consensus would be dangerous. In any such instance, the president shall have sole authority to adjourn the meeting. This is a provision called for in California state law because this is a school board meeting that we're conducting in public. And so we want to make sure that we're able to restore order, and if we're not able to do that, then if there's consensus of the board, we will adjourn the meeting and clear the hall.
You just told us all the rights of the board, but we have rights too.
Marvin Dodson.
Wait.
Marvin Davidson, you have 1 minute, sir.
So just let me borrow like 2 seconds. First of all, no school district should be telling anybody's child about sexual orientation. That's the parent's job. And here in America, as well as in San Diego, first of all, it's not your place to do that. Thank you.
Evening, Marvin Davidson. Your SHEP program, if someone at home was to show through their website that information to other children in the neighborhood, there's a good chance they could be arrested as a pervert or a sex offender. You can't even send a child to school with 2 aspirin without a doctor's note, but now you want to allow teachers in the school district to send a minor child away to get an abortion if they're pregnant without the parent's notification. Parents are the legal responsibility over the child. The school has no legal right. The school would be open to a huge lawsuit. You're backed by Planned Parenthood, whose main agenda is abortion and selling dead and body parts. The school is responsible to educate, not to morally corrupt our children. You must not have a conscience, and you ought to be ashamed.
Brad Jones.
Hi, my name is Brad Jones. I represent C3 Church. I'm a youth pastor of about 700 kids. And I mean, everybody has made an incredible point, but what to add on to this is the ramifications of the emotional damage that happens to teenagers when they're exposed to this. The school boards, even the council and sex educators don't have to deal with this or don't see it, but I see it on a daily basis, and the guilt and shame that causes teenagers from depression to anorexia to suicide in some of them is something that I believe that we're all staying in agreement that we should just recall it come up with something that we all agree on. Global warming to many people is very important. I think that the lives of our teenage kids right now should be equally, if not greater, more important. And I'm happy to bring them all here so that you guys can look them in the eye and tell them that we're okay with what is currently happening. Thank you.
Deborah Beaver.
Deborah Beaver, OTBS, 788. Not sure how I got at the end of this, but I want to talk a little bit about some integrated classroom technicians that were laid off last year, 16 of them. You guys, I don't know if you remember. I'm sure you've heard from the teachers and principals about how they can't get their computers and their technology to work. And those are our members. So we've been approached by HR with some reclassifications of other positions to give steps, leveled steps to these positions. While it's an interesting concept, we would appreciate if you would recall the people that got laid off last year first. And then we'd be happy to talk about steps and a job ladder, but not having another position, still classification in our unit, work at a higher rate doing the work that people that were laid off were doing. So I'd appreciate it if you look into it and see about calling back those 16 people. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, I took the liberty as the president to extend the time that we spent on non-agenda public testimony so that we could hear from all the speakers that submitted slips. Now we go on to item section E. E1 is a report on closed session actions. Are there any reportable actions to report out from closed session at this time? Ms. Sullivan? Yes. I'm sorry, could your microphone?
There we go. The board voted 4-0 to reject all proposals regarding district-owned property located at 4100 Normal Street, 2375 Congress Street, and 2441 Cardinal Lane. The board in closed session approved by a vote of 4-0 to proceed with the San Diego Superior Court case number 37-2018-00024316 CLPA-CTL, which is a subrogation case.
So for those folks at home or in the audience that did not hear, the board voted unanimously 4-0 in closed session to accept staff recommendation to reject all proposals on the property in question. Now we go on to item E2, which is an information report on administrative assignments. Superintendent Martin.
Thank you, President Beiser. The management appointments this evening. Vice Principal for I-High, Victoria Conway. We have an I-High student here. Principal for Dingman Elementary, Maria Montgomery. Principal for Lincoln High School, Jose Soto Ramos. Principal for Mason, Jesse Harrison. Principal for Muralins, Jeff Martin. Principal for Porter Elementary School, Graciela Chavez.
Okay, on to item E3. This is another information item on the Associate Student Body President's Report. I'd like the ASB student representatives of the board to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what's going on with your school. Diego Robles, ASB President at Kearney High School.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So today I'm going to start off by thanking you for the opportunity to be here. This is my last board meeting. So thank you so much. It was a really great experience, a whole side of education that a lot of students don't get to see and learn about. And so it was really incredibly eye-opening. So thank you so much. And now for the Council of ASB Presidents. We just had our last scheduled meeting last month, but we do have the ASB Olympics June 5th, which is just all our ASBs coming together, playing some games and network and have a little fun competition. We also have an ASB Council celebration in June 11th, where we'll get to introduce the new ASB presidents and further that, keep that network going and pass down our gavels and stuff like that. So I'm very excited. And then lastly, I did talk a few times about the student-teacher connections being like the priority of this council. So in our last meeting, we did review a document that I created, best practices to kind of involve students and staff create that connection, so that will go along with our ASB shared folder and our shared inventory, which we have worked on this year. And now for Kearney, our last blood drive of the year is tomorrow, so we're very excited and getting prepared for that already. Our graduation is June 12th at the Golden Hall, which I'm very excited about. Prom took place May 5th, and our grad night the 25th, both of them super wonderful. I had an awesome time. And also, our ASB election results were announced today for our next president and so on. And most of our seniors are kind of just waiting for graduation because most of them already were just taking classes at Mesa College. They're finished with those courses, so they're just chilling until graduation. So I'm very excited. And again, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Are you ready to announce who the new president is?
Yes, it's Jennifer Garcia for Kearney High School.
Okay.
That's great.
Big shoes to fill.
And next we have ASB President and iHigh Virtual Academy, Dahlia Canonigo. Okay, sorry.
It's okay. Thank you, Diego, and thank you, board members. I'm Dahlia Canonigo, the ASB president at iHigh Virtual Academy. Our campus is located in Old Town, San Diego. Thank you. Okay. San Diego, however, we provide the opportunity of online curriculum throughout the San Diego School District. On campus, we have labs throughout the week, including science, math, art, physical education, and yearbook and ASB, giving each student the chance to further their knowledge in the subject, ask questions, and socialize with the diverse student body, ranging from actors to athletes, so that always makes for a really interesting vibe at our campus. On our campus, if a student ever has a question or concern, the staff is basically always there for us, creating a very open and caring environment. ASB holds socials, inviting the entire school to grow morale and create a safe space for students to flourish, as well as opening up field trips to the students, such as a field trip to the federal courthouse in downtown and the NBC studios in Kearny Mesa. ASB also partook in the annual Martin Luther King Jr. food drive, which we earned first place for, raising around 800 pounds. We also volunteered at Father Joe's for feeding the homeless, which was a great experience. We held an online auction this year to support our events. We have, since iHigh is kind of underfunded, this year we raised $1,815 to pass on to next year's ASB, which was a huge accomplishment. At iHigh, the students are always more than satisfied with the staff. So this month we found out that we'll actually be losing one of our teachers because the student count or the student population dropped. We found that this was very uncalled for because of the school's fluctuating population throughout the years. We need as much support as we can get. Though last year's numbers might have been lower than the year prior, that doesn't mean that students will transfer into iHigh to join us increasing the population. So transferring a teacher that the school would need later on in the year causes for the students to have a difficult time bonding with the faculty and difficulties placing the students with what teachers they're going to get. But ultimately, iHigh is doing really well and will accept any challenges coming with the new school year. So thank you.
Thank you. On to item E4, Superintendent's Information Report. Superintendent Martin.
I'm going to skip that tonight. Thank you.
Board Information Report. Each board member will have opportunity to speak and share information if they wish. Start with Trustee Barrera.
Thank you, President Beiser. I had the pleasure of attending the end of the year celebration for our student equity ambassadors, and we have, I think, 3 who are here tonight. We've got, of course, Diego Robles, we've got Johnny Wynn, I thought I saw Johnny here, and we have Vesna, who's, of course, in the booth in the back. So can we give a big round of applause to our student equity ambassadors? Amazing work all year long, and I think maybe the highlight of this year was the Student Equity Ambassadors' leadership in crafting the district's response to the Parkland shootings and student activism. So thank you again for your leadership. And then I also had that we had at our last board meeting a few students from Hoover High School who came and talked to us about the issue of student transit passes. And it turns out that this is part of a campus-wide effort to engage, I think it's 10th grade English classes, in identifying an issue that's important to those students and becoming active in it. And so I had the pleasure of going and speaking to that class. And we look forward to a new generation of students from Hoover and hopefully other schools in advocating for transit passes for young people. So, thank you.
Dr. Whiters-Payne.
I asked for one of Mike's minutes.
There's no deferral of time.
Yes. I would like to say that there are a lot of things happening. And like Mike, I kind of popcorn around to a lot of different places. Just want to mention the Urban Links Golden Pyramid. They had 250 students this time that they recognized with 3.5 GPAs, etc. City College today had a major event for African American children throughout the district. I guess grades 9 and 12. They were going for 12th graders and they moved the ages down. Comment later on Lincoln. I just want to really focus my attention on a couple of things. One is Morse had an event last week that I think is outstanding for all of us because it demonstrates the level of support that our schools are receiving from other areas other than just San Diego's city schools even. The Ford Motor Company had, they used Morse's lab as the test site for cars, for Ford cars, the F-150 I believe it was. They use Morse High School because it has standard level equipment and the students are being trained at that level. They use them as the test site to go ahead and paint whatever paint they used and drive them around, and others are trying to find out, well, what's going to be the new model. Well, they use our Morse High School, so we're very pleased with those students and with that staff and what's going on there at Morse. It's a world-class program there at Morse High School. Also, I want to say that I had the opportunity to serve as the inspector, and my husband thought, what are you inspecting for? The JROTC program at Lincoln High School, and Johnny Wynn just gave up his area of command and passed it on. But I learned a couple of things in that process. There are 300 slots for every ROTC program, and we have 13 sites. Now, some students would say, I don't want to go into the military, etc. But one of the things that they do is to mentor, nurture students, because I don't believe you're going into the ROTC program, Johnny. You've done your stint in high school, now you are going on to college. It helped him to get a scholarship. He's going on, and was it Berkeley? Yes, he's going to UC Berkeley and is getting a scholarship, etc. So we have some slots available that students can get some training, some support. They're nurtured by adults in a structured program. And for some of the students who may need that, this is an opportunity so you don't have student loans, etc. So I want to thank you for allowing me to share that much.
Dr. Evans.
Thank you. First, I want to congratulate the graduates of 2018, those here on the dais and also out in the audience. And recently I had the privilege of meeting with the class of 2020 at San Diego High School, and I'll be bringing that tape to the school board here sometime soon. But as we were listening to different speakers tonight, I was just thinking about how inspirational this particular group of students are. And I've been meeting with them since they were in elementary school, and now they are sophomores in high school. But they were so, compared to when I was in high school anyway, they are so aware of the challenges that they are facing in the world. They're very concerned about the environment. And they're also very, very compassionate in terms of really wanting to be inclusive and really reaching out to all types of people. They're very thoughtful, and so it just gives me a lot of hope for the future. So we'll be talking about that more later.
Thank you very much. Couple things. First of all, last week had the opportunity to go to the Daylord Elementary School open house, and it was phenomenal. They have an amazing orchestra program, choir program. They have an award-winning robotics team that has competed. This is an elementary school robotics team, and next year they're expanding it to include kindergarten and first grade. They go and compete at Legoland, and they have all these trophies from this year and all the great work that the kids have done. The other thing that's phenomenal about the parents at Daylord Elementary School is how many of them were there. You couldn't even walk. It was shoulder-to-shoulder parents and kids. And then the other thing that's really phenomenal about Daylord Elementary School is they have art program once a month. And all the students had put their art up all over the outside on a little clothesline. So it was really phenomenal to see that, how much they've learned about the different art styles, distance art, impressionist art, and things like that. And the kids, I randomly went up, taking a play out of Dr. Evans' playbook, I randomly went up to a bunch of kids and interviewed them a little bit, and just asked them, what do they love the most about Daylord Elementary School? And the first kid, of course, said recess. And then his brother said art. Two other kids said orchestra. Other kids said art and choir. And so that's the part of Daylord Elementary School experience that they really look forward to every day. And of course, in alignment with California, they're a phenomenal school academically. So that was really, really a great joy to see so many parents involved in what's going on in that school. And then also, I did have a meeting with several parents about the sexual education program that we heard so much about during non-agenda public comment. So I had a conversation last week because a lot of other people have been sending us emails. And in the conversation, we did discuss how sexual education is a state-mandated curriculum now, and that the materials and the curricula that we're using, it's my understanding, is state-approved as age-appropriate education, which is science-based. So then that concludes this portion of the agenda. Now we'd like to go on to the board consent agenda. Do I have a motion for G1 through 7? Please vote. Okay, on to item H1. This is the Advisory Committee on School Board Member Elections Report and Recommendations. If Dwayne Crenshaw, we already did that. We'll now hear item I1 from the Advisory Committee on School Board Member Elections Report and Recommendations from Michael Snyder and Claire Crawford. Please come forward and present.
And thank you, Mr. President and fellow board members. And I'm actually going to yield the floor for just a moment to Claire Crawford so that she can make some comments initially. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mike. So I am going to start off by, I think what Mike and I had agreed to do is I'll start off by providing the actual results of our process in terms of kind of recommended policies and a little bit about the some of the equity issues and concerns that I think informed our process, and then Mike will go through our process. And I do want to say thank you for recognizing Dwayne Crenshaw and Rise's work with an actual official acknowledgement. And I also want to just mention that there are several of our committee members who are here in the audience today, a student and
please stand if you're on the committee and you've helped serve, or raise your hand. Thank you.
So first, just to go through our recommendations, and Mike will go more into the process of public outreach, et cetera. But so based on the feedback from community via town hall meetings, the online surveys, and some of the expertise of committee members, the set of recommendations that have come forth to you from our committee are that we support a process by which school board trustees the process by which school board trustees are elected should remain within the city charter. We recommend that SD students under the age of 18 but older than 16 should be able to vote in school board trustee elections, that non-citizen residents within the San Diego Unified boundaries should be able to vote in school board trustee elections. The proposal to make school board trustees a full-time position with full-time salaries should not move forward. And this one was probably the slam dunk. So the following issue should be placed on the November 2018 ballot for consideration by residents of the City of San Diego residents within the boundaries of San Diego Unified School District, instituting term limits for members of the San Diego Unified School Board for 3 terms totaling 12 years. And then we further recommend that there be further investigation, impact research, and discussion conducted on the following issues: moving from a hybrid sub-district primary and at-large general election process to a sub-district-only election process, and then increasing the number of school board trustees and the number of sub-districts in San Diego Unified School District. So a couple of things I just want to highlight in terms of equity issues. So I think some of the concerns and issues that came out of our process were regarding representation of various communities. In terms of the participation process, there were, if you look through our report, you'll see numerous points where number one, I know Mike is going to go into this, but the rapid amount of time, the very short amount of time we had to really flesh out these issues, I think made the task, although we completed it, difficult to complete in the kind of robust way that we would have liked to. And so I think some of the limitations of that were that there were a few issues where the town halls had different results than the surveys. There were a few issues where it was clear out of the town halls that there was a difference between the opinions in some of the south of the 8 communities versus some of the north of the 8 communities. There was in districts D and E, I think there are 23, I think is the number, 23 schools that are on the year-round schedule that were not actually in session for the entirety of our process. And including, we had a testimony from the Crawford cluster raising concerns about sufficient outreach to immigrant communities, which I think was reflected in the low number of non-English language surveys that were completed. There were only 7% when I think it's around 25% of students in San Diego Unified are English language learners. There was some difference while the demographics did reflect by and large similarity with San Diego, with the city of San Diego. There was underrepresentation of Latinos and for people who reported race, and they were different from the actual student population's demographics. And I wanted to point out one thing on a couple of items. I mean, I think with the students, increasing student participation in elections and non-residents, these were 2 issues that there really was in particular for non-citizen voting, where there was a pretty big difference in the town halls between the results in communities represented in D and E versus A, B, and C. And I think those are both reforms that would increase representation of underrepresented communities just based on the demographics. And then in terms of the sub-district to district-only elections and increasing the number of board members, within our committee, there were 2 different analyses that were both about increasing equity and increasing the power of communities of color. There was one argument that was very clear that sub-district elections will empower the voters in that sub-district to elect their representatives, and there was an equally clear argument that sub-district only elections will prevent residents of districts D and E from being able to weigh in on a majority of the school board seats. Both of those things, combined with what seemed like some confusion in the town hall about the issue, I think, led our committee to recommend that those issues were important and deserve significantly more analysis, an ability to provide real numbers around voting, who would be empowered, who wouldn't be empowered, to the community, and that they should continue to be studied, discussed with the community, and more time and effort should be put into those issues for consideration in a future election.
Thank you, Claire. One point I wanted to make was in taking on the role as the chair of this committee, I saw two obligations. One was an obligation made by this board to the city of San Diego, and that was to gather stakeholders' input. And I think we did that to the best of our ability. The second was regarding what recommendations and how those would be put forward. There was quite a bit of discussion from members as to whether we stay strictly with stakeholders' information or actually go with the committee itself. And I made the decision not to question that, but to go forward so that we've had all the committee members feel that they actually were part of this committee and working together. And I must say, in 6 weeks, I'm very pleased with Rise San Diego for not only getting the 5 town hall meetings done, but on top of that, to get a survey prepared, get it out to the public, and get 1,300 responses was, to me, a sign of success, that we met the obligations we put forward. So that's what we are presenting to you tonight as the final report, done in a short period of time, and with people like Johnny Nguyen very involved, and not surprising again, and I had to add his name since being Madison High School. I was glad to see 2 Madison representatives on the committee. But moving forward, we are here to answer any questions that you might have. I'm making a point of staying as neutral as I can, as I did throughout the entire process. In the meantime, I do have Susie Reed here, who helped draw up the draft and prepare the report for us. So she is also available for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay. At this point in time, if that concludes the presentation, I think it would probably be good if we went with public comment, and then we could go to board member comments or questions. Okay, so at this point in time, call up some folks. We have quite a few people, so please limit your remarks to 2 minutes. So let's begin with Chris Kate. Sorry, all the TV cameras have left.
That's quite all right. Good evening now, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. And I do want to start my comments by actually thanking you for getting this done in a very short period of time. And I agree that Mr. Crenshaw and the team at Rise need to be commended for the work that they've done in a very short period of time to get 1,300 results, which is we understand is a non-scientific poll. That was a non-scientific survey. So I'll speak to some of the issues regarding that in the rest of my comments. But I mean, this is a process that myself and 3 of my colleagues began back in February of 2017, which culminated in a grand jury report that listed a number of recommendations, and our council supporting the findings that were outlined within that grand jury report. And going back to January of this year, when we heard from the board at our rules committee regarding the update to this process, the goal at that time, what was told to us, and I'm quoting, was to identify if there was a consensus on any of these issues, and was speaking in regards to the questions that were outlined in the survey. I think I can gather from the results of this survey that there is quite a bit of consensus on the 2 main issues in which we started to discuss upon, which was term limits and sub-district elections. I don't think that is in question whatsoever. And if you look at some of the comments by organizations that are represented from that committee on a number of different matters from throughout this county, folks have said Local officials understand that district-based elections provide better representation for diverse neighborhoods and ensure all residents have a voice in local government. That district-based elections would be an important step in ensuring that voters of all races in smaller, unrepresented neighborhoods would have someone from their community on the governing body. This helps level the political playing field, strengthens our civic process, and gets more people involved in our democracy. That was from Alliance San Diego regarding district-only elections in Poway. So there's no question that this process needs to move forward. These reforms need to move forward, and I would hope that you would take the actual survey results and be able to include those in your recommendations to our body. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brett Koslavka.
Good evening, President. Good evening, council members. Thank you for the time. And again, Dwayne doesn't get enough credit, so I want to throw hats off to Dwayne one more time. Thanks for doing that. I also want to thank the committee for putting out the effort that they did to get together, and especially Mike Snyder. I know, Mike, you're going through some pretty tough times, and it's always good to see your smiling face standing there in front of us. I would like to follow up on the heels of what Council Member Kate said. You know, it's interesting to me to stand here and listen to everything that was presented by the committee and the co-chair, and to find that the two questions that were the only reason why the committee was put together was at the bottom of the questions concerns me greatly. You have 80% of the people that were tallied. Data is the data, doesn't tell you anything different. If the board wanted more members to be representative during those town hall meetings, they could have done a better job of presenting it and putting it out there on their websites instead of bearing it on page 3. So when you do a survey of whoever is there, that's what you get. 80% of the survey said term limits were needed. 60% of those, when they asked what type of term limits do you want, they want 2 4-year terms, not 3. 12% of the survey said 3. 60% of them want sub-district only elections, and then 60% wanted the 2 2-year terms in the sub-district elections, and that is the only 2 questions that needs to be discussed. Everything else that was put out there, and I thank you for questioning other situations, 12% wanted 6 to 8 to under 18-year-olds in voting. 12%. Why is that even a question to be placed on the ballot for 2018? You know, you've had plenty of time to look at this. Questions came from other members of the committee that I see that are sitting here as well. Say, we didn't have enough time to do this. We've been at this since February of 2017, just like Council Member Kate was saying. So you've had time. If people were confused with the questions on the survey, the committee's the one that created the questions. Well, so no wonder they're confused, because they can create questionable questions. I beg you, and I'm asking you, to do what's right. Do and align yourself with the city council. Other large districts in the state have done it. Large districts across the country have done it. Don't put this off anymore. Let the voters make a decision on the 80% and the 60%, and it's the only reason the committee was set to be there. And I thank you for your time.
Citizen?
So please reject the report that only had 7 votes in its majority. 7 votes out of 1,300 people that had different opinions. Instead, recommend term limits, area elections, and 9 areas. It costs $250,000 to put a measure on the ballot. $250,000. Please do not circumvent the will of the people by resetting term limits with a subsequent amendment. Don't waste tax money. Respect the will of your constituents, the people's will. Your own data supports it. The report that was approved by this committee does not support the will of the people, and you represent the people. So please, term limits, area elections, and 9 areas. And remember, it costs a lot of money for citizens to have a chance to vote. So do it once and do it right.
Francine Maxwell.
Shirley Chisholm said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. I think the citizens of San Diego that attended all these town halls, they brought their folding chair. When Richard Barrera sent his doghounds on this committee to outthrow different strategic plans that he had to distract people, people stayed focused. I did 81%. I counted surveys, 1,243. If there was 1,300, great. But they sent a clear message. You tried to distract us, but we stayed focused. No matter where you went around this city, there were people that attended all of the same town halls, went to the same tables, and talked to each other, and the consensus was. So let's stop playing games. Let's stop playing politics. Let's do what's right for children and the taxpayer. Enough money is wasted already on a lot of things, but we don't need to waste money on this. The city council, the rules committee, the full council, they deserve to only bring 2 things that most of the citizens want so that we can get on the November ballot, and let's get down to business. Let's stop playing games. Let's stop going and grabbing all these people and putting them on a committee to talk about children voting. Come on. They know when it's time to vote. We don't need teachers. We don't need people that hold their grades to tell them who to vote for. That was a distraction ploy by Richard. It didn't work. There were other things thrown on that survey per Richard's request to the people that Richard impaneled, and it didn't work. So come on, let's just move forward and get this done. No politicking anymore. Time is now. Be courageous. Stop standing with the crowd. You decided to be a trustee, and trust is at the core. People trust you to make the right decision. We enjoy seeing every button green, but at some point, somebody need to push a red button.
Jennifer Avina.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Avena, and I'm the co-chair of the Youth Empowerment Committee for the League of Women Voters of San Diego. And I'm speaking in support of the Advisory Committee's recommendation to lower the voting age for school board trustee elections to 16. There are compelling reasons to lower the voting age that might not seem obvious at the outset. Allowing the first vote at age 16 or 17 has the potential to create increased voter participation in our country for generations to come. This is because voting is a habit that is most likely to be created when a first-time voter is supported and encouraged to vote by those surrounding them. Once that voter takes to the polls, the likelihood that they will do so again is much greater, creating a habit of voting that can increase participation rates throughout the voter's life. So that first contact, that first experience of voting is monumentally important in determining future engagement of our citizens. With this premise in mind, think back to what was happening in your life at age 18. Most likely, you were going off to college, starting full-time work, joining the military, maybe moving out of your parents' house. Age 18 is one of the most tumultuous times in most of our lives. People often point to the dismal turnout rates of 18 to 24-year-olds in our country as proof that young people are apathetic about voting and politics in general. However, voting is often far down on the list of responsibilities that need to be mastered at that age. Conversely, think of when you were 16 or 17. For most, that's a period of relative stability, a time when you are still invested in your community, your school, and your family. If students can vote for the first time during that important period, the likelihood that they will have the encouragement and support needed to become a habitual voter is higher. In addition, though we might think of a 16 or 17-year-old as too cognitively immature for voting, science shows that the critical thinking skills, information processing, and deliberation necessary in the type of decision-making required for voting is as mature as an adult by around age 16. Finally, by allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote, this school district strengthens the clear commitment to civics education made by this board when it adopted the 2015 Civics Learning Resolution. What we as the League of Women Voters have experienced is that when youth are given support and the opportunity to engage in their communities, they will do so, and very often brilliantly. Therefore, the League of Women Voters of San Diego asks that the board further strengthen support for civic learning by recommending a November 2018 ballot measure to lower the voting age to 16 for elections of San Diego Unified School District School Board trustees. Thank you.
Thank you. Eileen Coblins.
Good evening. I'm also a member of the League of Women Voters of San Diego, and I'm here to support the testimony of Jenny Avena in favor of lowering the voting age in school board elections and possibly local elections to 16. This change has been implemented successfully in a number of countries, and in the community of Tacoma Park, Maryland, where studies actually have indicated a higher voter turnout among 16 and 17-year-olds than was true of 18-year-olds voting for the first time. Those of us who are now or whoever have been teachers know that the key to engaging students in the classroom is motivation. And what greater motivation can we provide students in helping them to see a real-world purpose in studying civics than actually possessing the privilege and responsibility to vote? Thank you.
Lori Thiel.
Hi, good evening. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters here in San Diego, and I'd like to take another moment of your time to support the notion of letting 16-year-olds vote by giving us a little bit of perspective. There was a time not so long ago in this very country when people understood that women didn't have the mental capacity to vote, that women were not able to make an informed decision, that they were too easily influenced by the people around them. Well, it turns out nearly 100 years later that women are almost running the country now. We have women who are running in record numbers for races all around the country, and they're winning. That is because women have been given an opportunity to participate in their civic responsibilities and duties. That comes from voting. The very fundamental opportunity we have as citizens is to vote. And to allow a 16-year-old or 17-year-old that opportunity earlier in their lives rather than later in their lives will only serve to make them better citizens, more informed citizens, and more engaged citizens as they become adults. Thank you.
Jeff Bennett.
I want to thank the board for putting this committee together, and it was an honor to serve as the DAC representative on the committee. Something that's been very important to me, and you've heard me come up here and say, is that stakeholder engagement is key to this back and forth, and you hear it there. And in this issue, I think you guys have done a great job in ensuring that we had some stakeholder involvement. It would be great to have a little bit more time next time. But as far as the stakeholder involvement piece, the survey was written by the committee, and we had a diverse group of people, and the questions were approved unanimously, which, I mean, that's a great accomplishment. That meant that we felt that it was a fair and impartial way that we asked the questions. And one of the things that seemed to come out, just from my listening, I went to all of the town halls, is that the voters really cared about being heard and having their voice heard by their representatives. On the two issues that we recommended further investigation, I really encourage you guys to move forward with further investigation on those issues. I remember being shocked when I went to the District D meeting, and the board member question came up, and it was 5 and 9 pretty much evenly split. And one of the real concerns was, well, 7 might not be right based on the way boundaries would be drawn as far as board members. And so it's important when we look at those things to draw it in a way that we empower people, we give people a voice, and I appreciate that you guys put us on this process, and I encourage that to continue. But the other thing I would mention is I would encourage looking at the clusters. It's a great element you have in the school district, and there were some conflicts. Part of it was short time, but look for the clusters for some representation in any type of future committee, because I think you'll get even better engagement than the appointing process. So thank you for the opportunity to serve, and I think we did a lot in the amount of time provided.
Thank you. Johnny Nguyen.
Good evening, school board trustees. I'm glad to be back here. My name is Johnny Nguyen, and I'm a senior at Madison High School, and I'm graduating in 2 weeks. Today, I wanted to share my personal stance on and express my support for 16 and 17-year-olds voting for school board member elections. And so one of the biggest takeaways that I received as a student here at San Diego Unified is that all of you really care for what we have to say as youth. And so next week, I'm going to be working at the election polls as a 17-year-old, and I think it's really wonderful that 16 and 17-year-olds are allowed to work and volunteer their time at the polls. And it always makes me wonder how people allow our students to volunteer their time at the polls, which includes an online training that takes 2 hours, transport themselves independently to a physical classroom training that takes 3 hours, and work the polls from 5:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., 12 hours, yet we question the responsibility to vote. And so I just wanted to talk about how, like, our district, how can our district treat our students like adults and expect them to become adults ready to enter the real world, yet hesitate to place faith in their ability to vote at 16 and 17 for school board members. And I believe that I speak for many of my peers like Diego Robles and student equity ambassadors when it comes to how much we appreciate how inclusive the district has been for the youth voice and allowing us to shape how we tackle issues like the Parkland shooting. And so I hope that the board will continue the work that they do and take action by supporting and allowing 16, 17-year-olds to vote for school board member elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam Goldstein.
Hi, my name is Adam Goldstein. I'm a teacher in this district, and I'm speaking in support of the recommendations that the committee has put forward. But I have 2 concerns that I want to voice about the process of how this went about. And one concern I have is that it was initiated by a flawed grand jury report, and that the grand jury is not at all representative of our school communities. And then another concern that I have is that the question of charter schools did not come up during this process. There are over 50 school boards, charter school boards, that are in this district, and I believe only 1 is elected. So why wasn't the charter school board being elected a question for our communities? So moving forward, I ask that that be considered. And then I just wanted to give a shout out to that student who just spoke from Madison. People, 16 and 17-year-olds can vote on their SGT, so wouldn't it make sense for them to also then be able to take a step above that and vote for their board members? So, thank you.
Keisha Borden. And then Lindsay Birmingham.
Good evening, board members. I am here to ask that you support and accept the committee's recommendations also. However, I have some concerns about the process. The process seemed rushed. There were limited opportunities to participate. As was stated before, many of my colleagues were off on spring break, especially in the area that I work in. I attended the forum at Lincoln High School, and a comment that I heard from many of the participants, many of the tables, was that they needed more data, more information about other large urban school districts to compare. They needed actual election data from the last school board elections, or maybe the last several school board elections, seeing how the at-large voting went compared to the actual district or sub-district voting went, to compare them. And basically, a lot of the people did not have a lot of information about the city charter, so more information about the city charter may have been more helpful. Regardless, I'd hope that whatever changes are made going forward, they come from deep analysis, looking at the questions that have been raised this evening, and more thorough engagement with the community, especially in districts D and E. So again, I ask that you support the committee's recommendations. Thank you.
Lindsay Birmingham.
Lindsay Birmingham, SDA President, and Stryker, who attended the meetings with me
many more meetings than we ever imagined we would attend in 6 weeks, and many more hours than that I ever anticipated would go into this process. So I want to make sure all of you guys know that the committee worked long and hard to bring forward this recommendation. Not only those that attended the meetings, also the subcommittee that worked on the reports, the subcommittee that worked on putting together the survey, and outside of the committee, Rise San Diego did an amazing job facilitating everything that happened. I am standing here in support of the recommendations that our committee worked long and hard to bring to you. I know there's been some concerns raised that it doesn't go in line with the survey. The survey is only one piece of information. We were all appointed to that committee in order to also bring forward our background knowledge, our information as well, to take that into account when we came up with our decisions. And so I want to mainly speak to the 3 decisions that, or 4 decisions that are coming forward before you. Of course, keeping it within the city charter. There's major concerns what would happen if we pulled it out of the city charter. Secondly, term limits. It really was consensus among the committee that was something reasonable. We thought 1 or 2 terms wasn't enough to actually get, we all know it takes time to learn your job. It took time for me to learn my job, and I only had 2 two-year terms. And we thought that 12 years was a good amount of time to be able to come, make a difference, do what you need to do, but then also open it up to others to have an opportunity to make a difference in the school, in our schools and in our district. In addition to that, 16-year-olds voting. In this district, we talk a lot about civic engagement, teaching our students to be civic-minded and to be involved and have a voice in the decisions that they make. They have a voice at their school sites on their site governance teams. They have a voice through the associated student body. Why not give them a voice in electing those that are making decisions on their behalf? And then finally, allowing our parents of undocumented students to vote. This is something that we strongly favor. They are our students, they are all of our students, and those parents have every right on top of the rest of us who were born here in this country to be able to have a voice in the decisions on what happens to their students in their schools.
Okay, that concludes public testimony on the item. Board member comments or questions? Trustee Barrera?
I'd like to move the committee's recommendation, and then we can have...
Okay, we have a motion to move the committee's recommendation. Is there a second?
Please state in simple words the committee's recommendation.
Okay, all right.
Very simple.
So
people know what we're...
Yeah.
I understand that the committee is making the following recommendation, which is broken into a few different parts. The board asked the committee to engage the community around, I think, 7 key questions. I think it was 7. And I think the committee's report went down question by question. The first question was, should school board elections remain under the city charter? And I think the committee's recommendation is yes. I think the second question is, or I'll get these out of order, but a question was, should there be term limits? And if so, how long should those term limits be? And I believe that the committee's recommendation is that there should be term limits and that those limits should be 3 4-year terms. We asked the committee to engage the community around the question of whether people in our community under the age of 18 should be allowed to vote in school board elections, and if so, what would the minimum age be? And I believe the committee recommended that 16-year-olds would be allowed to vote in school board elections. We asked the committee to consider whether non-citizens should be allowed to vote in school board elections. And I believe that the committee's recommendation, I can clarify this, is that non-citizens should be allowed to vote. I wasn't clear whether it was further defined as non-citizen parents of students in the district.
It would be very hard to take out the parents.
Okay, so it was a broad. Oh, here we go. Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. Non-citizens. We asked the committee to consider whether a school board trustee should be a full-time position with full-time salaries, and the committee recommended against that we asked whether the school board elections should be done in, rather than having the runoff be at-large elections, whether they should be confined to district-only boundaries. And if so, should we expand the number of districts? And I believe what the committee is recommending is that there's consensus around the idea of district-only elections, but there needs to be more study, more dialogue to determine how many board seats there would be and how those seats would be drawn. And I don't know if I'm forgetting one of the recommendations, but I think that is, I think those are the committee's recommendations. Dr. Evans?
So when you said on the non-citizens, the committee's recommendation was what?
That non-citizen residents of the district should be allowed to vote in school board elections. I think one other clarification, and please correct me, Mike, or any members of the committee, is that several people commented on the kind of the short timeline, and when we established the committee and asked the committee to get out and engage the community, one of the things that we did ask was there consensus on one or any issues that could be placed on this November's ballot, knowing that that would be a short timeline, but also understanding that in order for the committee to feel comfortable recommending something go to this November's ballot, there needed to be clear consensus around that issue, that it was ready to go now. And I believe the only recommendation that the committee is making to take to this November's ballot is the recommendation around term limits. Is that correct? So even though the committee is recommending that we move forward and further define a process for district-only elections, that be something that takes place over time. And that even though the committee is recommending that students 16 and older should be allowed to vote, that's also a process that would take time and I believe would require some action by the state government to allow that to happen. And so that's not recommended, my understanding, for this November, but it is recommended that we move this forward, the concept forward. And similarly, for non-citizen residents, that's a recommendation of the committee that we move that forward, but not for this November's election. Is that fair? Is that correct? Okay. So
the non-citizen recommendation is not on this November ballot? Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So that's what.
And neither is the student is the students 16 and older.
Right.
So 16 and over is not for this November's ballot recommendation?
Correct. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that was what my question was, because I see the different recommendations that the committee is making, but we're also in this time frame need to approve something for the November ballot, or to recommend the city council, I should say, for the ballot. Right. And that specific one was the term limits issue.
Yes. Okay. So that is my
and remain in the city charter.
Remain in the city.
But that doesn't necessarily have to be on the ballot because that's a moot point.
That's a non-action.
Right?
Right.
So then the only item then would be term limits on the school board
for this November.
For this November, and then the other items would, we would maybe reconvene another committee to give them more time to evaluate it and see what they think.
Or some process to move this forward.
Okay, I understand.
So for purposes of discussion, I will second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other board member comments or questions? Dr. Payne?
I would like to comment on some of this. First of all, it may seem like it's an irrelevant issue to talk about remaining within the city, but that was a very controversial issue in that the state governs school boards on one level with the education code, and they specify how they want elections to go forth versus remaining under the city charter with some flexibility in terms of how folks are elected. So that's very important. Also, within that discussion, I think that there was some discussion about boundaries. That's item number 5, but it deals with the issue of boundaries, because at one point I lived in Spring Valley, right across the line there in Paradise Valley, and the lines are not contiguous. So it means that we, although it stays on the city charter, those folks still get to vote on what's happening with schools.
And maybe Carrie can weigh in, but my understanding is that the opinion of both our legal counsel and the city attorney is that if you live in the city of San Diego, but outside the boundaries of San Diego Unified, you cannot vote in a matter concerning San Diego Unified.
But we have both. We have both issues. We have parts of San Diego that are not a part of San Diego Unified, and then we have some folks who are not San Diegans who, on the board of Lemon Grove, et cetera, who attend school. So those people are not being disenfranchised either.
I believe if you're a resident of San Diego Unified boundaries, you're allowed to vote in it.
Right. So that's why to actually have that vote in conjunction with the issue of the city charter is relevant. I hear what Johnny and the others are saying about those who are 16 and older, and passionately support them, because I know that not only are they the future, they're right now. And we know that Parkland has made a difference already. And we're looking for them down the road to have a greater voice in what's going on with their lives, because it does come down to your very life nowadays. The full-time position, I don't think anybody on this board really wanted a full-time assignment, because you guys have full-time jobs, and Mike and I are retired and like it that way, and we've done our 40 hours a week and so on. And so I'm glad they studied it, but thank you for your decision, but it's not going to impact any of us. And the term limits, personally, I weigh in either way, 8, 12, because you always have the option not to run. You can run or not run for the 12 years. And district only versus the hybrid approach that we have now, that's a big controversial issue, and folks like Dr. Dorothy Smith have weighed in on that. And as this goes forward, I'll be interested in hearing what some of the other folks have to say about the reason for having a sub-district primary versus a general election for the general. I think that either way, it's a very complicated process to run two races. And even if we do vote to go forward, I think we should have it just as the city council does, that even with 2 people, you can't have it that you win in the primary and that's it, because you have such a small fraction. It would be like saying the fact that 1,300 folks responded to the survey, they represent the million folk in San Diego City, folks who didn't get involved and wouldn't, but would be asked to weigh in on this issue. And in the same way, I know in some of the other school districts who have district-only elections, if there are only 2 people, then there's no need to have 2 elections. You just go forward to the general without having to wage a campaign, because it is a waste of time if you have to go both the primary and the general with district-only elections. So I would hope we would be wise and not have the process to go through those machinations. The 5 or 9, I'm sure for me personally, and probably for a lot of you, you have 4 or 5 high schools. And Richard, you only have 2 high schools, but for graduation, we're split, trying to make all of the graduations, and thankful that Crawford has its graduation on a Monday, or the day before we they finish, and then the other two, and I always miss SCPA, but, you know, trying to get around to all the graduations, you want to be there to send your students on. It would be nice to have, you know, to divide those up. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Barrera?
Yeah, so first of all, I just very much like to thank the people who served on this committee, and I appreciate, you know, that this was not only long but difficult meetings and conversations. I was cursed by many of you many times for the idea, and especially the folks that I asked to serve. But the committee was put together with the intention of bringing a diverse group of perspectives from people who are actively involved in our school district and with our schools. And I would, quite frankly, contrast that with the grand jury. I spoke to the grand jury when they were beginning this conversation about you know, changing the school board elections. And I have to be honest that, you know, a nice group of people, and I think there was one retired teacher in the group, but they didn't know anything about how our school board works or how our school board elections work. And so this process was not a response to the grand jury's report. This process was designed to bring a group of actual stakeholders in our district that represented diverse viewpoints together to get out and listen to the community in, you know, various ways, and then grapple with these issues. And these are complicated issues, as Dr. Whitehurst Payne said. The people that we've had speak tonight to this issue have represented varying perspectives. And I'm sure, you know, what you heard, you know, consistently was that people have different ideas and different perspectives, you know, on these issues. And I know the committee approached this with a sense of responsibility because we're talking about changing a process that's been in place for decades. And whatever this new process ends up being is likely to be in place for decades, long after most of us, except for maybe Johnny and some others, are involved in these situations. So we have to remove ourselves, you know, from these issues and think about long term, you know, what's best for this district. And I know that that's what the committee took on, and it was not easy. And so it's not surprising that the committee's recommendations would come back reflecting, you know, difference of opinion in the community. Where the committee identified one issue as having clear consensus, and that was the issue of term limits, you came forward and said it's time for that to go on the November 2018 ballot, and I appreciate that. The question of district-only elections, of course, is an incredibly important and complicated question, because I think not only the 5 of us sitting on the board today, but every board member, well, Mitz, you preceded me, but every board member that I've worked with on this board, and I believe probably every board member going back years and years, the first thing that a board member would say is, I care about and I'm responsible for every student in this district and for every school in this district, not just the students and the schools in the sub-district that I come from, but every student in this district. And of course, this being a large, complicated school district, we have a lot of students who go to school not in the area that they live. And so, you know, so changing a system that requires every board member who's elected to be answerable to every voter in this district is something that requires a lot of thought. And then on top of that, of course, this board has grappled with, and I believe come to clear consensus around the concept of equity. And equity is a tough concept in a district like ours. And I would say it's a particularly tough concept for Dr. Evans and Dr. McQuarrie and President Beiser. Because what equity has translated into in our district, among many other strategies, is a focus on 5 key high school clusters, San Diego, Crawford, Lincoln, Morse, and Hoover, that are all south of 8 and that are all outside of the sub-districts that you live in. And so having a board that has come together and achieved clear consensus that we care about every student in this district, we care about every school in this district, but we have to pay attention to the students in the schools in greatest need, and those happen to be, for the most part, schools in those 5 south of 8 clusters, is a concept that we need to protect and be very careful about a structure that would essentially say, because I'm not answerable to the voters south of 8, my priority is not the kids south of 8. And I worry about that, and I've been clear about that from the beginning of this process. And so for me personally, a move to district-only elections has to be done with great care and has to be done in a way that doesn't set up structurally a system where the students who are in greatest need are not represented by the majority of the board. So I appreciate that the committee has come back and said, before we move to a sub-district only election process, which is probably, there's consensus in the community for a number of reasons to move in that direction, but before we do that, we need to do some analysis. We need to know if we were to draw 5 districts, what that looks like today. If we were to draw 7 districts, if we were to draw 9 districts, what would that look like? The city council has district-only elections, but of course there are 9 city council districts. So I think I certainly would want to be extremely clear as we move forward under the committee's recommendation to look at the concept of district-only elections, that we do that with the lens of equity, that we approach all of our work, and that we do not end up with a structure where we've got large communities with students in great need that don't have the ability to have a say in who the majority of the board is. So I think that's an incredibly important issue, that we move forward timely, but with clear analysis. And so if we come to the city council at some point and say we're representing changing the system from at-large elections to district-only elections, that we have some sense of what the implications of that would be. And I can say flat out, my opinion is that if that move was to result in the current structure where we have the 5 current sub-districts more or less as they're drawn, and we know every census there will be a little bit of change to that, but if we end up with 5 school board seats in the way that they're currently drawn, and that means people who live south of Interstate 8 in District D and E don't have a voice in who the majority of the school board is, I will oppose that every single time that comes up, because that's not a process that's about equity. Now, can we get to a process that's about equity by enlarging the number of board seats and moving to sub-district, and then having the benefit of smaller districts with the ability of a trustee to focus more on those? That's a valid question, and something that we should take up. And then the questions of, first of all, should 16-year-olds be able to vote? Well, again, I'm going to be extremely frank tonight. Given what we've seen in this meeting tonight, for somebody to argue that students under 18 are either incapable or not thoughtful enough to vote in school board elections versus adults, I think you'd be hard-pressed to make that case. I think we've seen some of the most thoughtful, articulate, knowledgeable citizens in this community speak to us tonight, and they've been students, and I think mostly have been under 18 years old. So the idea that 16, 17-year-olds can't vote in school board elections because somebody's going to tell them how to vote is so incredibly disrespectful, but also so incredibly missing the contribution that young people are already making in this district. That concept, I believe, strongly needs to move forward. Not that I believe we should ask the city council to put that on this November's ballot, because there are a lot of, I think, things that need to happen in order for 16-year-olds to be able to vote. But boy, I think it's incumbent on all of us to figure out how to make that happen, so that that voice of young people is included in deciding who sits on the school board. And then similarly, the question of non-citizens. In all of our sub-districts, and maybe particularly in districts E and D, we know that many of the parents who contribute so much every day to the strength of our schools, and who, by the way, are out working every day and paying taxes to support our schools, should have a voice in who sits on this school board. And I know that there's a lot of issues, regarding federal elections and state elections, but I don't think that's what we're talking about. I think we're talking about non-citizens being able to have a voice in their local school board. And again, I think that's something that will take some process, for people to grapple with, think about. But to disenfranchise, as we currently do, such a large group of parents in our community who are active contributors to our district, and to say that, yeah, but you can't vote for us, you can't decide who's on the school board, I think is not right, and I think we'd be a stronger district by enfranchising people rather than continuing to disenfranchise people. So for those reasons, I strongly respect and support the recommendations coming forward from this community. They're thoughtful, they reflect how complicated and difficult coming to consensus on these issues is. And I think the way that the recommendations have come back with, we believe we have consensus on one issue, and that's term limits, and we recommend that go to the voters in November 2018, and that the other issues we want to move forward on those issues. We want to move towards district-only elections. We want to move towards 16-year-olds being able to vote. We want to move towards non-citizens being able to vote, but we have to put the time and thought into how that would look. I think that's incredibly thoughtful work, and I appreciate the committee's work.
Dr. Evans?
Yes, well, first, clearly this topic is less hot than sex education, judging by the number of people who are left in the auditorium. And that is a disappointment, because we really would like to see more people involved. I'm glad that we have one former school board member. I don't see any other former school board members or candidates or anyone else, but I would hope that as we have this discussion tonight, and it is recorded, that City Council and other people across the city would listen to this discussion, because it's not just as simple as what did the survey show and what was the final vote by the board. There's a lot more thought than that goes into this. And so I guess one of the things, first of all, I know one of the things that was part of the impetus for this was a report by the grand jury, and as Richard was saying, when people hear grand jury, it sounds super important. But there's an issue of the school board and are very different than other elected bodies too. So my first question was, well, what are the problems that we're dealing with, that we're trying to solve? And I think one of the problems is board member and constituent contact. And I don't know that any of these are going to seriously address that, because if you have 80,000 voters versus 100,000 voters or something like that in your district, that's not going to mean you're going to be able to reach out to them a lot more. And this really issue here is, and if we make the comparison to city council, we don't have personal staff to be in touch with our constituents. Which is why when we get emails and so forth, and we can't answer every email, we rush through them quickly and so forth and try to get a general sense of what's going on. But clearly we have never proposed adding more staff for school board members, because with all the budget limitations we have, the last thing we want to do is spend more money at the central office. Then there's the issue of citywide elections. I'll call them citywide elections, even though it's a school district, which I know when I first ran the board looked very daunting. Like, how do you possibly reach out to that many voters? And I used to joke that it's larger than a congressional district. To get elected to the school board, I had to have more votes than Sarah Palin got to be elected governor of Alaska. So I think a lot of the problem here is what we really need, and this was not part of the committee's work, were clean elections, where people not only get signatures from people to support their candidacy, but get a few bucks, like $5 or $10 symbolically, to show that they really support the candidate, and have the campaigns publicly financed so that the candidates could actually talk about the issues, rather than just going around and raising money. And then the other issue is, how do you get more people involved or more people to participate and run for the school board? There was the issue of salary, whether it's a part-time salary or a full-time salary. There certainly are limitations now, because a person currently on the board either has to be retired or have a job that has some flexibility that allows them to put in the many hours for this. I do think it is better for it to be part-time, because I think that really embodies the citizen leader in terms of being in the community and not just being in an elected position. So I do want to thank the committee and all the members on the committee for the work that you did. I had no preconceived notions myself in terms of the 3 people that I pointed to the committee as far as what their viewpoint was going to be, or what their recommendations would be. I realized that there was a limited amount of time, but life is a time-limited exercise anyway, so we always have to operate in some time frame. I know that town hall meetings and so forth can be very sloppy. That's part of the essence of democracy. I think if there had been more time, people at the town halls would have been able to have more background information about each of these issues and make a more informed decision that way. We know that the survey, as Councilman Kate pointed out, is non-scientific. So, with 100,000 students and however many parents that involves, and parents and family members, we, have heard from 1,000 or so of them, and we certainly got a sample there, but it's not a scientific sample. And to me, as I read through the information, and as I was at one of the meetings, what's more helpful were the comments about why people took a particular position, rather than just sort of voting on the position. It's an advisory committee, so obviously it's not a rubber stamp that there's a survey click and okay, the board automatically votes that way. We have to take all of the information into account. So the 2 key issues that were responded to by pretty much everybody involved were about term limits, number 1, and number 2, sub-district and the number of seats on the board. Now, First of all, in terms of term limits, we're not like the Board of Supervisors, which for 20 years had the same 5 people serving. We've had a 4-term incumbent who was defeated. We've had a 2-term incumbent was defeated. We've had a 1-term incumbent was defeated. So obviously there's an advantage to incumbency. Nobody's going to deny that, but it certainly does not exclude someone else gaining the office. And the other issue in terms of term limits, when some of the comments that were made, and I would tend to agree with them in terms of getting board members up to speed and really participating. I know when I got on the board, I thought 4 years was too short and 8 years was too long. And now I'm in my 9th year, so I'm not sure what happened there. But I know that in LA, they did make the change recently, I believe, to term limits for 3 terms, if that's correct. But one of the things is, in terms of reform and change, is it's very slow. And that's really important too, because otherwise we could just have a rotating body that's not really making progress. One former superintendent who was an admiral talked about it. Making change was like turning around an aircraft carrier. This is a very, very big district and a big bureaucracy, and there's a lot to do in terms of making change. And the real change that we've been able to make in terms of equity across the district and really including every child is a result of a long-term process. And so but I do realize that this is important to the voters, and so I will support term limits. Then there's the issue of sub-districts and the number of seats. And one of the problems, I think, with a 5-member board is that change can happen very quickly, sometimes too quickly. It can kind of make it unstable, because if you have a 3-2 split in one election, it can go the other way, and then it can go back the other way. And so the other problem I have with a 5-member board, because of the Brown Act, if you have an idea, you can only discuss it with one other board member. And so if there were, for example, 7 members, you could actually have a coalition of 3 people discussing and fleshing out ideas and coming up with something as a sort of a committee. It's sort of hard for us to form committees here when we only can have 2 at a time. So I think that's important to look at in terms of more seats on the board. Now, this at-large versus sub-district, a lot of the information and the arguments about this are not fully informed. The grand jury talked about the other districts that have had, or other entities, government entities, had to change because they had at-large elections and they didn't have broad, diverse representation, so they needed to go to district elections. When Reverend George Walker Smith was elected to the board, they were at-large election. All of them were at-large. And so most of the people on the board, he said at the time, were from Point Loma and La Jolla. He got on the board, he told me, by not putting his photograph in the voters album as the first African American to be elected to the board. But we do not have at-large elections, and we do not have sub-district only elections. It is a hybrid, so it's important for people to keep clear that it really works both ways. And so the first issue that is guaranteed under the current system is that every geographic area is guaranteed to have a representative from their area. Now, what was mentioned in the grand jury report and has been repeated by others is that sometimes the citywide election, there's one person wins in the primary, and then a different person wins in the general election, which supposedly means that the sub-district was overruled by the rest of the city. But I think if you go back and look at the voting statistics, and we've done this in the last election, I've looked at previous elections before, the tendency has been for the person who won in the general election also won in their sub-district in the general election. And this is one of the reasons that the city council decided to go from not making final decisions in the primary election, because it's such a lower turnout, and so it's more representative. And so first of all, there's a guarantee that someone is from each district, and it generally happens that the person who wins in the sub-district general election is also wins across the district. So, and then but again, school board is different than city council or anything else. As Richard was talking about the equity issue, we have many students south of the 8, since we use that north-south split, who attend school north of the 8. So therefore, they are disenfranchised if they don't have a say in who are the board trustees in representing the schools north of 8. So it's a complicated issue, and one issue there is the choice program that further complicates it. But we need to have a system. We do have a system now that allows for the local district to be represented, but to be responsible to the entire city. And so I think, it's still, by increasing the number of seats, there's the possibility of working it out that way. I'm not proposing this, but an example is before we had the strong mayor system in San Diego, we had one person who was elected as the mayor. So we had council members representing each district, but there was at least one person who was accountable to the whole city. We don't have an elected superintendent, so it's more like the city manager. But that would be one way to introduce some equity into the system. So the issue of sub-district elections, I think, and the number of sub-districts needs to be done at the same time. It would create too much instability to be doing at one point we're going to add number of seats, and then another point we're going to go to sub-district elections. That just would not be stable at all. We have coming up in 2020 another census, which would be the perfect time after that to redraw the district lines and also decide on how the elections would be held. So on that, I agree that should not be rushed and should not be limited to the time limits of what we had for this proposal right now. I think the term limits can go forward because there's a general consensus about that, but I think we need to be more thoughtful about the next step. And that's why I will support the recommendation of the committee. And again, I think the committee did a good job in terms of balancing the different viewpoints. And while I was saying that the survey is not scientifically sampled, I think that the committee was a pretty diverse group in terms of viewpoints and so forth. So I think we can rely on their recommendations.
Dr. Whitehurst-Payne?
The ultimate test is the voters. They get to weigh in on it. Whatever comes forward, if they approve, they can vote for it. If they don't, they won't. So, and that should be the message to even the folks who have a particular position. Got to listen to what the voters say. If the voters say they don't like this, they can vote that way. But let's just let the voters say without any manipulation.
Thank you. I want to also appreciate and thank everybody that was on the committee. I know that I heard regularly from the folks that I had appointed on the committee, and I want to thank them and all the other people that stepped forward on this voluntary assignment. It was a tremendous amount of time. And I really appreciate your guys' dedication and commitment to thoroughly vet all the different points of view, because there is no one point of view that was actually agreed on by everybody, with the exception of term limits. It's my understanding from the committee. And so to the extent that the committee did reach consensus and is bringing forward term limits, and that's the recommendation, I believe that I absolutely agree with Dr. Whitehurst-Payne. Let's go ahead and let the voters then decide on whether or not they want to go to term limits or not. And as Dr. Evans had mentioned, many of us are on this board because we defeated an incumbent. And that's something that I think is telling, because it goes to prove that democracy works. and that we're, responsive. With regard to also some of the comments about district in the primary and then district-wide in the November general, there are a lot of folks that do get first place in the district only election in June, and then go on to also win and represent that district on the board. And I'm an example of that. In 2010, I came in first place in the district and was elected in November. And then last cycle in 2014, I received 68% of the vote in the district, and then went on to be elected in November. So I think there are lots of things to take into consideration. And so I think that's really important. It's really interesting to me that there's all these other questions, but we're not, looking at those yet. And I absolutely respect the will and the decision of the committee to ask for a little bit more time to reevaluate that. I think Dr. Evans made a good point that when we have redistricting in 2020. After that, that's a good opportunity and a time to strike to explore going to 7 trustees with, and see what kind of districts those look like, and then go to district only at that point in time. I think that's something that I could get behind. The idea of having 16-year-olds vote in school board elections, I think, is something that I would really look forward to embracing and hope that we can continue to analyze that, look and explore what other school districts have gone down that road and what are some of the results in terms of the data. I know that we've had questions, legal questions on non-citizens voting, and I know that will also require more time and analysis legally and with regard to that situation. One of the things that I think is also interesting that I haven't heard come up is we have a number of military families in San Diego Unified with their children in our schools, but because the military moves them around, they maintain their residency in their home state, so they don't get to vote on school board elections. And so that may be also something for further analysis, because I really think that those military families with kids in our schools should have some influence. A lot of those parents are involved in their schools and the PTAs. I talk to them, I visit with them about issues going on in their schools, and I really think that may be something we ought to kind of figure out and see what we can do. I know we don't want double voting. We don't want them to vote in their home state and then vote again here for the same race. But I think as long as we're only talking about school board and local elections, then I think we need to have that conversation, because I know in other communities they've started talking about things like this too. So while I had hoped and thought that we were going to be voting and considering and debating more of these questions, I think the term limits is a good first step. And then let's go ahead and do the additional analysis on the other items and questions, and let's look at those. And I think, as Dr. Evans said, consider those for the 2020 cycle in alignment with redistricting. So if there's any other board member comments or questions, please vote on the recommendation from the committee. And that passes unanimously. On to item H2, which is an update on access to public information review of the district practices pertaining to public record storage and production, with recommendations to improve transparency, cost efficiency, and security.
Thank you, President Beiser. I'm having legal staff join me up here on the dais to do this presentation. I'd like to introduce you to Kimberly Chapin from our legal office. Hey, Kimberly. Thank you. Okay. This is an information update that has been requested by the board, so I'm going to have Ms. Chapin present the information item with some recommendations at the end for you to take action on.
Good evening, President Beiser, members of the Board of Education, Superintendent Martin. We're just going to...
Is your speaker on?
We're just going to briefly go over some of the things that we've been doing to improve the efficiency of responding to Public Records Act requests. This relates back to a presentation that was provided to the board on July 25th of last year, and so it's a continuation of that discussion. So the purpose is to review the district's current practices pertaining to the storage and production of public records, and to continue to implement measures to enhance transparency, cost efficiency, and importantly, security. As we talk about the Public Records Act tonight, I think it's important to note what the Public Records Act is not. It is not a policy-making opportunity for retention of records, the destruction schedules, how records should be maintained, what records should be maintained. It's all about disclosure. So what you have, you disclose. And records under the Public Records Act are defined very broadly. For example, it's any writing, including electronic, emails, now voice messages that are transcribed into emails, notes that you make at your desk related to various things that you're working on, containing about anything related to the conduct of the public's business, and that is prepared, owned, used, or retained by a public agency. When responding to these requests, it's incumbent upon legal staff, because we're charged with responding to them, to assist the requesters in making more focused requests. Courts have been pretty clear that you can't just engage in a fishing expedition, but you need to have a somewhat focused request so that the agency can properly respond. And the more specific a request, the easier it is for a local agency to respond in a quick, a more efficient manner. The next thing we're going to talk about is how we respond. The law provides that we have 10 days in order to provide an initial response as to whether or not we're going to disclose the records. If we're unable to make that determination because the records are located off-site or at various different sites, or because of the volume of the records, then we have an additional 14 days in order to indicate whether we're going to respond. This does not mean that we have to produce the records in 14 days, which is a common misnomer. We need to produce them within a reasonable period of time of locating them. When we have these deadlines, one of the things that we're trying to do while we're evaluating the request is we make the request for the documents, and then we spend, depending on how many they are, a considerable amount of time reviewing those documents. Many of you know I was a city attorney in my former life, and so I've been doing Public Records Act requests for about 20 years now. It was a lot easier as a city attorney. I didn't have to worry as much about student information in my records. It was much more clear-cut. The volume, well, I'm not going to date myself, but email was not quite so prolific then. So it was unusual to get more than 5,000 documents in response to a request. That is now the norm. It is not an unusual event to have that many documents provided as a result of a single request. So some of the things that legal offices, not just ours, but throughout the state have done is create separate tracks for simple and complex requests, so that the more simple requests can be handled first while we're gathering the documents that are being that are subject to the more complex requests. We've requested departments to provide records directly where there's no legal review required. For example, if someone wants all contracts with Acme Company going back to 2015, then those aren't going to require legal review because they've been approved by the board. So we can refer them to board docs, or we can refer them to our friend Andrea in strategic sourcing, who will gather all of those contracts for her. Those are pretty simple requests because there's not much that legal services needs to do in order to redact them and make them legally defensible for a public record. The other things we've done is reduce the amount of detail involved in responding to the request. Instead of giving full-blown responses, we've really narrowed it down and focused our response back to the requesters, and how we track that information is more focused and specific now. One of the things the public hopefully has noticed is that we've been loading our Public Records Act requests and responses into board docs. And we asked that facilities also handles Public Records Act requests, and they today have begun uploading the responses to the facilities-related Public Records Act requests into board docs. So there's a tremendous amount of information and public information available through board docs now related to public records. The other thing we do, and this is really, it was precipitated by a change in law that specifically allowed us to refer requesters to areas on a district's public website for the documents that they're requesting. Before the law was changed, we kind of assumed that we could do that because we were providing the documents available for inspection, but the legislature officially recognized that as a means of compliance, and we've been active in communicating the various links on our websites where people can obtain that information. The other thing, the Public Records Act does not require agencies to produce reports for free. For example, if someone wanted to know all the terminations that occurred in the last 3 years, well, to comply with that, we could pull all the employee data or the termination agreements, whatever that was not exempted, and it might result in 1,000 documents and take a year. Or we could, because we store some of that information electronically, generate a one-page report in a matter of a couple of hours and provide that instead. And so where it's more efficient and cost-effective to provide a report, then we will do that rather than produce the thousands of pages of documents that support the underlying report. We mentioned briefly the difference between simple and complex requests, and just because we're in legal office doesn't mean that everything's complicated. Some things really are quite simple. For example, and this is an actual request, that asks for a single contract with any amendments between San Diego Unified and Winston School. There was only one document. It was a public document, and it took 5 days. And that includes the day the request came in, the day to search for it, and then to get the response out, which is pretty quick. On the other hand, we have the more complex requests. And I'm not making this up. So all emails or electronic communications, again, this is a real request, dated between August 1st, 2015, August 30th, 2016, to and or from, it was 22 administrator and managers and the superintendent, and containing or related to 27 different keywords. That's a very complicated request. So complicated, in fact, that it led to 131,971 emails. That's not the number of pages, that's the number of emails. The data set was so large that it could not be exported. So, in other words, sometimes, like if you get a really big boulder, it's great to look at, but how are you ever going to get it into your backyard? We couldn't get the boulder into our backyard to be able to manipulate the data to respond to the request. So the requester subsequently modified it on 3 different occasions, reducing the number of individuals and the number of key terms. That still really resulted in 5,746 pages that were produced. There was about another 400 or so pages that were deemed non-responsive. All of those pages had to be reviewed and redacted to ensure that we were not transmitting any student data or other exempt information. And those are a lot of documents to have to redact. So the time to produce this was 12 months. And that's because this was not the only request we were working on. As the board has been informed, we get on average about 200 Public Records Act requests per year.
So
and they
just
all have to be addressed.
A quick question that, that when you're reviewing those 5,000 pages, the legal team has to read each one to see if there's any confidential information in there?
Every single one of them, sometimes more than once.
Wow.
The Public Records Act, determining whether or not a record is exempt or can be defended as an exempt record, takes judgment. And a lot of times you'll want to bounce that off other attorneys in your office, because the law isn't always clear, and so we exercise a good bit of discretion and judgment when we choose to redact or to determine that something is non-responsive, or whether or not the law would permit us to claim the exemption under the particular circumstances raised in that email. And so it's not a simple process. It's considerable judgment. It'd be easy if there were artificial intelligence or something that could just scan everything and exercise the judgment for us, but we're not there yet, and I'm not really sure that we want to be, because the human element goes to, you know, which side of the aisle do you want to be defending? Do you want to be defending someone's request for confidential student data, or do you want to be defending a case where parents are claiming that you produced confidential student data? I'm always going to fall on the side, I'd rather be defending the conservative approach of not disclosing the information. But every time we make that choice, we have to evaluate what is the current status of the law under these circumstances. How have other courts found? Does it relate more to the facts of one case or another? So it's not rote review. Some of the things that we've considered to help expedite the review rely on, for example, the city's record storage system. It's pretty slick, but it's also really expensive, and it's not compatible with our existing servers. And when we dug into it a little bit further, it seemed pretty similar to what we already have in board docs, and so we determined that it probably wasn't worth the additional resources to duplicate the city's effort for the district, given that we already had a substantially similar system in place. The other thing was redaction software, and that kind of goes back to what I said about artificial intelligence. Redaction software is kind of a species of artificial intelligence. However, it can only redact or search based on the terms that are entered by humans. And we cannot rely on redaction software. We have Adobe Acrobat that can search and redact terms. We still have to individually review them because, for example, somebody might ask for, I'm not picking on you, Cindy, all of Superintendent Martin's emails from, in 2016. Well, there might be emails where somebody calls her superintendent. There might be emails that misspell her name, M-A-R-T-I-N. And so it's not as simple as running a search for Superintendent Cindy Martin. It's superintendent, it's Cindy Martin, and various spellings of Cindy Martin so that we can fully comply with that request. Redaction software doesn't do that for you. You have to specify each of those terms individually. Also, we can't possibly know when we're redacting the software. For example, the request might be something related to, I want to pick an example related to students. The number of students that were expelled and who had the last name Jones. Well, if you do all email searches for students expelled with the last name Jones, you're going to get a lot of different students, right? You might also get students referenced within those emails that are not a part of the original response or request. So each of those have to be reviewed individually, other student names redacted. This usually comes up when we have parents requesting all emails related to their own child. And you would think that's pretty simple because they're asking for their own kids, but it's not, because it may actually reference other students within those emails. So that's why we don't really rely on a redaction software. It's not a substitute for the judgment and the discretion that goes into reviewing and producing those records. We have made some progress based on the things that we've been doing. One thing that Andrea specifically wanted to point out was that we completed 140 requests from September 1st to April 13th, but in the year prior, we had only completed 100 requests. So we're making a little bit of progress in terms of the documents. We haven't went through the effort of like counting up all the pages that have been produced, but you can assume that it's in the tens of thousands within the last year. The next slide relates to some things that we'd like to do going forward. And again, a lot of this is stuff that we're already doing, but that we want to encourage the board to comment on in terms of what we could do better. And again, you know, a lot of this relates to the exercise of general counsel's discretion in making sure that the practices of the office comply with state law, and on occasion, if we disagree with state law, having the discretion to bring that to the board and challenge state law under the applicable circumstances. So one of the things that we're doing is creating a PR page with guidance on how to formulate a focus request, continue improvements to the district's website to allow the public access to information without the need for formal requests. We're going to continue posting the responses in Board Docs Library. We think that that's important because we can refer people there as an initial spot to search for records. I already mentioned that Facilities Planning and Construction began posting their documents today. Thank you, Lee, for sharing that information. We're going to continue dual tracking our responses so that the simpler requests we can get out the door faster. Media requests are often some of the more complex, and we're going to refer those requests to communications staff for initial handling. First of all, communications staff is in a better position to understand and speak media speak than the lawyers most of the time. And so we want them to be able to work with media to try to find out what they're really getting at and help them develop focused requests that we can more efficiently respond to. The other thing we're doing is we're continuing to guide staff on the need to preserve records. And as an aside, some of the things that I know that we've been providing guidance on is not just how to preserve records, but sort of what it really means to send emails and how those can become records, and some of the sort of tricks and tips that I've told clients over the years, which is, and I'll share with you, that reply to all button needs to go. Reply to all, one, it's almost inevitably will lead to a serial meeting. Two, it creates duplicates of emails. So in those 5,746 pages produced, I guarantee you there are at least 500 duplicates. And it's because when you reply to all, the email search string doesn't distinguish with duplicates. So if 10 people get the message and it's an email request for all employees, all 10 of those employees' emails are going to show up. And if you reply all to those 10, then it creates another 10. And then exponentially, by like 15 minutes, you'll have 100 emails on a single subject. And 90 of them will be duplicates. So limiting the reply to all and CCs on emails can go a long way in reducing the number of documents that are produced in response to these email requests. The other recommendation is that legal staff retain the discretion to adjust our practices to ensure compliance with evolving law and circumstances. And this just relates back to, you know, it's not a mechanical process to review and produce these documents. There's a lot of judgment that goes into it, and the discretion as to when to exercise that judgment, how to exercise that judgment, is really imperative when we're talking about what to disclose and what not to disclose, and how to comply with requests so that it's consistent with the law and the district's policies, procedures, and other matters that are brought to our attention. So with that, I'm not talking about CEQA tonight. Everybody should be grateful for that.
Thank you.
Instead, it's public records.
So we do have a couple public comments, and then let's go to board questions or comments. Loxie Grant, or Gant? Loxie Gant? Looks like that person's gone home. Citizen? You have 3 minutes.
Regarding emails, 3 years would be a better time frame for preserving those documents. As you know, in this century, emails document what is going on in our school district. The Marnie Foster emails revealed the extent of corruption and Superintendent Martin's failure to act in that situation. It led to the superintendent stepping down and now being on probation for her corruption and her behavior. Having departments produce records, we'll see how that works. I asked the high-level chief of police for this school district to provide the policy on use of force and the use of tasers on teenagers, and he refused to provide that document. I have the sheriff's policy, and I have the San Diego Police Department policy. I still do not have the school's police policy on the use of tasers. There's no excuse for not being able to answer the requests of the public. That was the point of our CPRA Act. Simple requests. I don't get anything in 5 days. I'm lucky if I get a letter saying they got my request in 10 days. I asked for records from the California Department of Education that are massive, and I get an email that leads me to a link, and there it is, and it's redacted, and it's simple, and they don't charge me anything. This school district charged me $200 for documents that I never received. And it takes so long to receive these documents that by the time you want to go to court and sue to get the documents, your statute of limitations is over. So you're sitting there waiting for the records, and they have your money, and they're telling you you're going to get them, and it takes months and actually as long as 2 years to get documents. There are no excuses for you to provide the documents so that we can see what you are doing. Your track record is not very good. I'm reading emails of Kevin Beiser forwarding complaints of citizens to other people. That's huge. At least three instances, and those will be deleted soon. So how much more of that stuff is going on? Richard Barrera, he loves using his private email. I heard him outside in the lobby right after some people spoke, and he ran out in the lobby and gave him his private email and says, contact me. Right after Kevin Beiser had just said, we refer everything to the superintendent. Well, no, you don't. And those are the kinds of things that I read in these documents, and they should be provided, and there's just no reason at all that it's taking months to receive them. The standard email is, you'll get something in 8 weeks. Well, that is never going to happen. Never. And even though I know where the document is, I've given the date of the document and the people they're from. I have it in my hand, and the school district can't produce it.
That concludes public comment. Board member comments or questions? Dr. Whiters-Payne?
One question related to didacting and doing searches. Eventually, will you kind of take a look at the process involved in the example you gave about the superintendent, and you could have 1,000 different ways it's searched, but it would also be interesting to compare what you get versus you're having a human being go through, so that eventually you could look at the different permutations of what would help you through that process. Are you
saying like what we receive versus what we produce? And because we usually put them in piles, things that are privileged deliberative process, attorney-client communication, and we separate them out that way. So we get a group of what are considered responsive documents, and then all those responsive documents, responsive meaning they showed up in the search terms, then they are all culled to see if they're actually responsive to the request. For example, if it was, we want all emails saying OMG, and that was a real request too. We denied it. So did every other agency in the state. But then you would have to look through all of those to make sure that all of them that had OMG were part of the requester's document sort of mindset, like what were they trying to get? Like maybe somebody misspelled a word, and instead of it saying ing, it said OMG, and that one got pulled into the document research, when really what they were looking for is the shorthand for oh my God, or using other sort of slang expressions to communicate via email. So everything has to be reviewed. Yeah, it's tedious. So it's not just the subject line of an email that has to be reviewed. It's to who, from who, related to what, and every line of every email, including the little disclaimers on the bottom saying it's confidential. You know, it's, you read it top to bottom, you don't miss a step or a word.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Do I have a motion to, well, I guess I'd like to make a motion to adopt the 8 recommendations with 1 revision, the last one being edited to state staff shall adjust practices to ensure compliance with evolving law and/or circumstances. So I'm making a motion to move these 8 recommendations on improving our PRA process. We have a second? Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, please vote. And that motion carries 4-0 unanimously. Thank you very much for your time and your work, and we look forward to always trying to find any way we can to support you in the work that you do. Thank you. Okay, so that takes us to item H3 is not an action item. It's been moved to June 19th agenda, I believe. Is there a motion to continue item H3 to the June 19th agenda? We have a motion. Is there a second? And a second, please vote. That passes. We have a motion on H4 to 7. Is there a second? We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? We have a speaker on item H7. Citizen, you have 3 minutes. Speaking on the SDEA agreement, impacts and effects, I believe.
Part of that contract agreement states that teachers who get jobs elsewhere have the right to come back to the school district. I don't think that's a very good policy. It's very disruptive to people that have been hired since then. If a person takes a job in another district and leaves this school district, so they left. Okay. But that doesn't mean that they get to come back and step back into a job, because the people that came after them and took jobs and think, well, now I have a good job here, they get disrupted. And all of these leaves of absences and saying that people leave the school district and come back to the school district is very disruptive. As many years as I've been telling you that you need to look at those issues about leaves of absences and how people can come back to the district, it falls on deaf ears. But it would save this district a lot of money. It would allow people to move on. It would allow new employees to be ensured that they have a secure job.
Any other comments or discussion? Okay, please vote. That passes. On to item I1, update on the impact of the governor's May revise for the 2018-19 district budget. Superintendent Martin.
Thank you, President Beiser. I'm going to invite Dr. Greg Ottinger, our CBO, to come and present this item. As you know, the governor presented his May revise. This is not the final budget. Final budget is still coming, but we traditionally will give you an update on the impact of the May revise and what we're hearing currently and how that impacts our district budget. So with that, Dr. Ottinger.
Good evening, and thank you. President Beiser, Vice President Whitehurst-Payne, members of the board, Superintendent Martin, on behalf of the finance team who worked diligently to put together this presentation for you, we want to express our appreciation for the opportunity to discuss the governor's proposed budget, which he revised earlier in May. Tonight we will summarize the state-level proposal briefly and provide available details as to potential local impacts. So with that, we'd like to ground ourselves with the state budget timeline and process. The blue highlight shares where we are at this point and moving into the State Assembly and Senate review of the May revision so that we can take our take our actions as such, all of which culminating with June 30th, the governor signing the budget package with the possibility of line item vetoes. So moving forward, the May revise, just as a reminder, is the governor's true last opportunity to revise his revenue and other forecasts based on updated economic indicators and more updated tax collections. However, though it's his last true opportunity, the governor has the choice to invoke line item vetoes based on any legislative changes. So aside from a few adjustments this year to the LCFF and one-time dollars, the overall budget was fairly consistent with what we saw in the January proposal. We absolutely saw a continued cautious approach from Governor Brown with continued focus on rainy day savings and, again, emphasis on one-time funds. So that moves us to a little bit closer to look at a multi-year, and here's a depiction for you and the public of the key items and how they were projected in January over a few years based on their adjustments in May. And you'll notice that Governor Brown has, for the most part, largely stayed the course from January to May. And again, in terms of the one-time dollars versus ongoing funds, what we've seen is staying the course with one-time funds, and we are going to continue with our partners and our Director of Government Relations to ensure Sacramento is aware of our belief and the importance of shifting those one-time funds to ongoing dollars so that those can support not just our 18-19 budget, but our out years, and we can really enact where the board and the superintendent are guiding the district, which is making sure that we can make wise fiscal choices over a number of years. So moving those to ongoing funds will allow us to continue to support every aspect of the district. Which leads us to a little bit closer look at the district. And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to provide accurate information to this point in time. So here are estimated impacts listed here. However, as earlier mentioned, these are projected based on this point in time, and I did want to foreshadow that the budget first and second reading will be coming up, excuse me. I think we went ahead a little bit. Right. I don't have a keyboard on this, so I'm wondering. Ta-da. Okay, thank you. So this is based on what we do know, and what we do know is that we've solved for the 18-19 shortfall, and we will continue to have a shortfall as stated. We are expecting a shortfall for 19-20 based largely on our known increasing expenses from our larger categories such as step and column and health and benefits and utilities and additional programs. So we are expecting that to continue. And in a few weeks, as you know, the staff is currently preparing our final budget adoption, which will again be to you in public June 19th for the first read, where we will absolutely provide the accurate information based on all the letter schedules that are all being finalized at this moment. We also we will continue, as the board has directed us in years past, we will base those projections based on what we know in the May revise, while we are also listening carefully to the Senate possibilities in terms of their feelings on the one-time funds versus ongoing. We're also monitoring closely the Maritucci Bill 2808. So we're monitoring all of those, but to be consistent with our approach as the board has directed, your final budget will be brought to you based on the known calculators as expressed by the May revise. And by the way, the Maritucci Bill 2808 was brought to the Assembly for a third read, and that was filed today. So again, we are monitoring that closely. And so at this point, to close, before questions, wanted to bring our attention to the calendar and the proposed budget, again, on the 19th, and the final on the 26th, where we will lay everything out for you. And at this point, this is an information item to give you a pulse check on what we're interpreting with the governor's May revise, and I would love to entertain questions if the board members so desire.
Okay, we have no speakers, public speakers on this item, so any board member comments or questions? Dr. Evans?
Yes, on the increases on the previous slide, the 0.1, 4.5, and 5, so there was a little bit of increase with the governor's revise. And this is sort of a back-of-the-envelope question, but there are also expenses that we've approved since the initial budget. So is it more or less a wash in terms of the 18-19 budget? Do you see what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. What I would ask that is in this session we allow the letter schedules and the budgets to be put together for that June 19th first read, because that will take into account the collective bargaining agreements and any other factors or variables that have changed from second interim. So it would be a little speculative at this point to assess whether it was a wash or not.
Right. Okay. So at that point, you'll look at this $10 million, and you'll look at the increased expenses, and then obviously, if there was any gain, it would be a slight reduction in the next year's, the out year's budget.
We're very conscious of the 1920 shortfall as was projected in first and second interim, and so that information will be forthcoming.
Okay.
Can you discuss the short-term issue, some short-term monies versus long-term? Because I don't think a lot of folks understood that there were some items that he had in the budget before that were short-term, and we were not considering them because short-term means
one-time versus ongoing. One-time versus ongoing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I believe that the overall statewide discussion when on January 10th with the governor's proposed budget, a significant amount of funds, $1.8 billion, was allocated across the state, not as ongoing, not necessarily adding to the LCFF base amount. It was set aside as a one-time use. As different funding sources increased, there was widespread belief by different entities that as revenues continued to show signs of increasing, and the temperament of different legislators was to, instead of having those be, frankly, a one-time fund, would be a bonus. Instead of having it be a bonus for school districts, which you really can't base a long-term budget on, moving that actually into, say, an increase in overall year-over-year salary, in which that would allow a school district to make long-term decisions and make assessments. And so what we saw in May was despite the different conversations that were happening about the use of those funds, whether it was a conversion from one time to ongoing, the governor truly stayed the course, with the exception of a relatively small increase to both the one-time funds and a relatively small increase to the ongoing.
So at this point, it depends on if the legislature makes the change from one time to ongoing. If the legislature makes the change, and if the governor agrees.
If the governor would keep
veto
the veto power away, correct.
So that's a big if.
Big ifs, which is why we are staying the course with making the calculations and assessments for the proposed budget based on the May revise, but also monitoring closely for any of those shifts and changes.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, Trustee Brewer, any comments or questions? Okay. I just have a couple of comments real quick and a couple of questions. First of all, the bill that you had mentioned, 2808, Martucci, this board just voted unanimously to support a resolution to support that legislation in Sacramento. And we also voted this evening to support a couple of other pieces of legislation in Sacramento that would increase the base grant funding for all school districts in the state of California, because we're at the bottom in the United States of America in funding per pupil. Also, obviously, to convert one-time funds to ongoing, because for the entire term of Governor Brown, every year we get one-time funds. And then the one-time funds are there the next year. And it's one time every time. And I think that's what we call ongoing. And so I hope that the Assembly reads this for what it really is and classifies the money appropriately so that it can be allocated for ongoing expenses, which are services for our students. So I think that's very, very important. There's some other things that I want to hopefully, as we get towards the final budget adoption in June and then in July, I know that the budget is an ongoing process as we reassess our expenditures and our current state of affairs. That's how, I think Dr. Evans brought it up, that, we are not 100% sure where we're going to end up because there are continuing to be expenses in the current year cycle, and then obviously things that are budgeted that aren't spent, then we can bank. And so a lot of that stuff will true up at the end of the budget cycle in the year. But I hope that we will continue to do what we had said that we would do in March, and that's continue to look and evaluate and reevaluate the services that we're providing to students based upon the money that we do have. And that, I think, includes taking a look and seeing if there's any opportunity or possibilities to create a stronger feedback loop with our employees in the schools and our bargaining units to make sure that we're listening to them about the concerns that they're having and that we're addressing those as they're presented. For example, I do know that there have been monthly meetings in the past, and I believe the last couple of months that those didn't transpire. So I hope that we can reestablish that monthly meeting with leaders in our schools and bargaining unit presidents and members so that we can continue to hear what's going on, what are their concerns with regard to workload issues so that we can make sure that the work is getting done to support our students, with regard to filling funded positions in our schools. I believe that there are some concerns about that some of those positions that are funded, that are not being swept, continue to be vacant, and like to get an assessment of that. I believe that's about 100 positions. I know that at the beginning of this last school year, in September or October, we had a lot of staff transition and changes, and HR moved to fill all those vacancies, and I think they did a pretty good job as far as I had received information around January 3rd, that most all of those special ed paraeducation unit positions and special ed teaching positions, most of them had all been filled by, I believe, early January. And so I think that speaks to some of the work, and I hope that we can continue to receive updates on that. And that's one of my questions, is that I hope that before we do our final budget adoption, we could get some information on how many funded unfilled positions do we have in the district that are continuing to be funded next year, so we can at least measure that and look at that. That's really important, I think. Another piece of information I think that would be helpful for me to have an informed decision before we do the final budget adoption is just to get a sense of how many FTEs do we have in the central office and how many have we had in the last 2-3 years, to do a comparison. And I understand that some of those FTEs that are funded in the central office are folks working in the schools. For example, our elementary music teachers, VAPA. They go around and every day they're in a different elementary school teaching orchestra or choir or band. So they're in the schools, but they're still funded out of the school district. So getting some information as to how many FTEs we have in the central office, how many are funded in the central office but work in the schools. Getting some of that information I think would help us to make a more informed final budget adoption. And then also, I just found out today that some concerns, especially with members of OTBS, that they're taking work home and that they're being asked to work on their furlough days. And I hope that that's not the case, that we're not asking people to come in and work on their furlough day, and that they're not taking work home. Another concern that I heard this afternoon regarding the budget was that we really need to take a look at, how furlough days are impacting some of our folks that are making less than, $30,000 a year or less than $40,000 a year, and try to see what we can do to make sure that we're recognizing the burden that's been placed upon those individuals. And it's kind of a trade-off because we are continuing with the furlough days, and those furlough days will expire, it's my understanding, at the end of next budget cycle, right? And that those furlough days will expire. And that this current budget cycle, we are not considering this evening more furlough days. Is that correct?
This evening is the information report on the governors. So this is an information item, certainly not an action item.
Yeah,
so
but we're not looking at, as a result of the May budget revise, we're not considering more furlough days.
For the upcoming year?
For 1920, yeah. 1819.
You're looking for what the solutions are going to be? We haven't decided what those are going to be as a final decision tonight. That's why he's saying tonight's not an action item. If you want us to lock in and say no, there's not.
Well, no, I'm just wondering if that's.
We haven't discussed that publicly yet. We'll bring those forward at the June budget adoption, what the solutions are going to be.
Oh.
Are you asking about 1819 or 1920?
Next year, yeah, 1819. Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Okay.
For 1819, for next year, we're not, as a result of looking at the May revised budget numbers, we're not having to, to look at more furlough days for next school year. Is that correct?
And thank you for allowing me to check for understanding. So if the question is for this upcoming 1819 year, I'm not aware of a proposal to change the furlough structure for the 1819 year.
Not for 1819.
Well, we've got a contractual agreement.
Right.
Right.
It's already been decided.
Right. I'm just clarifying some rumors that I had heard, and I think it's important that sometimes when I hear rumors, I like to kind of flesh it out and confirm the direction that we are going. Yeah, to not do that next year. And then with regard to some of the concerns, I know that back in March, when we discussed laying off paraeducators, we had a very long and robust dialogue at this dais about the total number of notices that were going out. However, there were a lot of paraeducators that could apply for vacancies. Where are we, hopefully before we vote on the final budget adoption, we can look at that, because it was my understanding that would result in a net of only 55 paraeducator layoffs. Is that correct?
I would need to confirm that with my colleague in HR.
Okay, but I remember like it was yesterday. Because that was a very pivotal moment for this board to have a conversation about this, because I believe that there were several paraeducators that were displaced at the CDCs, and that they were going to then have the opportunity to apply for other paraeducator openings in the district that hadn't been filled yet. So is that accurate?
He would have to check with Acacia in HR.
Okay.
Do you have that information?
Okay, thank you very much.
President Beiser, may I make one?
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all,
absolutely.
Thank you for the commentary. If I may hone in on a budget piece, I'd like to share one of your requests was to ensure there was a deeper understanding in terms of central office, what was allocated to the central office versus those services that are provided directly in staff. You mentioned VAPA directly.
Yeah, just how many FTEs are there in the central office is the first question.
In fact, if I could share that at the direction of the superintendent and the chief of staff and the leadership in finance, there's a diligent effort at this point to provide to the Board of Education a a final budget adoption that will also include analysis in terms of central office budget and whether that's strictly for central office or it actually serves school sites directly. And so we are very proud of the finance team and what they're putting together to be able to provide this additional clarity. And this came from conversations with community partners on a regular basis. Just wanted to share that piece that's in motion, and that would be something
that's great, because I know we've talked about this over a period of time, to try to get a big, get that 10,000 foot view of the district so we can evaluate and look at these kinds of pieces of information as we go forward. And then I believe also that we've heard from a variety of folks, from teachers and different individuals that work in the school. I know as I've gone around and visited schools, I've also heard concerns about the IT support. And I know that we're not at our final budget adoption yet, and that there's still a lot to be considered. And it's not like the governors May revise just gave us another $100 million. But I hope that we will kind of look and assess the need in the district before we go to the final budget adoption, to make sure that we're providing the services necessary to maintain the technology that we're investing in for our kids. So I think that's really, really important. I think I think that pretty much covers the comments that I had. I know that we've all been through this budget process year after year after year. Some years are much, much more challenging than other years. And we also know that this is a work in progress. And while this governor's May revise does seem to signal a couple more $1 million in ongoing, a couple more $1 million in in one-time expenditures, I think that we also have to make sure that we're sober in understanding that there are also some obligations as a result of bargaining in the 2% cost of living raise that I feel that our employees deserve and need so that they can continue to live in San Diego. And so then that's an expenditure that we have to account for. And so I hope that we continue to look at all of our options as we move forward before we make our final budget adoption. Okay. Any other board member comments or questions at all? Okay.
Acacia has the answer.
Okay, Acacia.
Good evening, everybody. So I don't have the total number of para that were FTE that were cut in February. I pulled up the item from the February 28th board meeting. I don't have my real computer with me because it's in the shop, but it is public information. It's on our February 28th board meeting. It's in the resolution entitled para. The cuts that were made were not necessarily a budget solution, but they were decisions made by sites and departments to streamline their information. I can come back to the board and provide the total number of FTE that were cut from the para unit.
Right, because I believe that, we had a very robust conversation at the dais in March that there were, because of the displaced paraeducators in the CDCs, that there were other unfilled vacancies for paraeducators that those folks can go into.
Yes.
So then on the net result would be, from my memory, about 55 net layoffs in the para unit.
Yes,
is that correct?
That's still right. There are, since that time though, as many of the positions within the para unit also have high turnover rates, many of those employees will be moving into any positions vacated by people who have moved on, moved to different places and things like that. So we're still confident that number of people actually who won't have a position will continue to decrease as we move towards.
Even less than that?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Is there any way that you could maybe please report to the board in June, at the end of June, when we do our final budget adoption, where we are with the impacts to those members of the para unit?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so thank you very much for this information item. I really appreciate your report. Now we're on to item I2, which is an action item on the Civic Center rate schedule with annual incremental rate increases for an additional 5 years. Is there a motion? We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Any speakers? Okay, citizen, you have 3 minutes.
I'm seeing a lot of private businesses that are, they have a monopoly on school sites, and that's not right. Now that you're redoing this and changing the rates, the rental office also needs to be advised of all of these companies that are using our school sites. I've seen employees and I've seen parent groups that are bringing in companies that they have personal ties to. These are taxpayer facilities, and when they're bringing them in like this and they're not paying any rent, they are causing wear and tear on our properties, and we need to be collecting that money. I specifically complained about a music company that an employee provided all this coordination for and all this marketing and free advertising, and then the customers just started pouring in, and that's not fair to other music companies in this city. There are many people that are struggling to pay their rent, to pay their employees, to pay their workman's comp, and they don't have the sweet deal of not paying rent, of having free advertising, of having literally just having the customers just line up and sign the contracts with a company. So there needs to be more oversight about it. It can't happen unless you put in, and it's the superintendent's job to do this, a requirement that these private companies do not get in for free. I've actually seen an athletic director just tell the rental office, don't charge rent to this company. You don't do that. That's corruption. You're giving away our taxpayer facilities, and we're paying billions, and I mean billions, in taxes to try and build better facilities and have nice places, and then we have people that just slip in and get use of these properties for free. And I'm not disparaging the rental office. They do a great job. I try to pull documents so I can see if there have been RFPs for these different people that are coming in and different documents, but it's very difficult with the process you have in there. And the superintendent needs to be ensuring that special people don't have special access and really get to profit off of our taxpayer facilities and having employees doing the work for them and just handing them a lot of money. But the taxpayers don't get anything. We just get our rugs torn up and our electricity used up and our bathrooms being flushed, and we get nothing for it.
Okay, thank you. Any board member comments or questions? All right, please vote. And that passes unanimously. Any more non-agenda public testimony? Oh, I apologize. Thank you very much. Do I have a motion on item 8, 10, and 30? We have a motion. Is there a second? Okay, we have citizens speaking on all three. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you. Just J8 and J30. J8, I like this. This is a language bridge. I see that this is money well spent. I think that was a well-crafted contract for our summer, a summer program for children to be able to learn English better. That's going to help them a lot when they start school. J30, Corvell. Okay, so this was reviewed, and you guys are going to save $65,000. That's great. That's great. But when I tell you guys to review VIBA, and you haven't done that in I don't know how many decades, and you could save $1 million. $1 million! You don't look at that. I don't understand you people. You'll do all this work to save $65,000, and I ask people, let's get rid of VIBA, and they go, what's VIBA? Well, right now they're providing yoga classes.
Board member comment or questions? Okay, please vote. Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Any non-agenda public comment? Seeing none, the next regular meeting will be held Tuesday, June 19th at 2018 at 5 p.m. The LCAP workshop will be held Thursday, June 7th, 2018 from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. in the Ballard Parent Center Auditorium. We are now adjourned.